Welcome to Tired Thinker, where big questions move slowly and philosophy feels like rest. Tonight's quiet journey is 3 hours of moral paradoxes to fall asleep to. Only 1% can stay awake. These aren't problems to solve, they're gentle dilemmas to wander through. Is it moral to lie to protect someone? Is one life worth sacrificing to save 5? Do good intentions matter if the outcome is bad? There are no easy answers, and that's what makes them calming. Let the questions drift in and out like waves. No pressure, no judgment. Just slow curiosity until sleep finds you. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it in your quiet corner of the world? Strange, isn't it? We're scattered everywhere, yet thinking the same thoughts humans have for centuries. If this soft thinking space helps you relax, I'd be grateful if you liked the video or gently subscribed. It helps this tired channel reach others who need a peaceful place to wonder. Now, let's begin. The trolley problem asks a simple question. If a runaway trolley is about to kill 5 people, is it moral to pull a lever that diverts the trolley onto a different track where it will kill one person instead? At first, the choice seems obvious. Saving 5 lives by sacrificing one seems like the better outcome. Yet when we look closer, the problem reveals how difficult moral decisions can be when they involve responsibility, intent, and the value of each life involved. Imagine standing near the tracks. The trolley races forward. You see 5 workers who cannot move in time. On the side track stands 1 worker. You are the only one near the lever. If you do nothing, 5 people die. If you pull the lever, 1 person dies. Many people choose to pull the lever in this scenario. They believe saving more lives is the most rational choice. This view aligns with utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is a moral theory that says we should take the action that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. 5 living people create more overall good than 1 living person. This view treats moral choices as math. Each life carries equal value, so 5 is greater than 1. But something feels uneasy in this calculation. Killing 1 person on purpose to save others is not the same as allowing people to die by inaction. In the original track scenario, if you do nothing, the deaths were not caused by you. The trolley was already heading toward the 5. If you pull the lever, you directly cause the death of the 1. This shift in responsibility troubles many people. They feel more guilt about an action that leads to death than about inaction that allows death. This reflects a different moral view called deontology. Deontology focuses on rules, duties, and intentions rather than outcomes. According to this view, killing an innocent person on purpose is always wrong, even if it saves more lives. The act itself matters more than the result. The tension between these 2 views is why the trolley problem continues to spark debate. One view prioritizes results. The other prioritizes principles. Yet real life often forces us to weigh both. Let's consider a variation of the problem. Instead of a lever, you stand on a footbridge above the track. A large person stands next to you. The only way to stop the trolley from killing the 5 workers is to push this 1 person onto the track. Their body would stop the trolley, but they would die. Most people refuse to push the person, even though the outcome is the same. 1 person dies, and 5 are saved. Why does pushing feel worse than pulling a lever? Both actions involve sacrifice. The key difference is physical involvement. Pushing someone requires direct and personal force. It feels more like murder. The emotional response is stronger because the action seems more intentional and violent. People also sense that using someone as a tool to save others treats that person as less than human. This violates the moral principle that individuals have dignity and cannot be used purely as means to an end. This variation shows how context changes moral judgment. Logic might suggest that pulling a lever and pushing someone are similar. Yet human morality is not driven by logic alone. Intuition and emotion influence moral choices. People might accept harm as a side effect, but they reject harm as the main intention. To see how this matters in the real world, consider medical ethics. Imagine a doctor with 5 patients who each need a different organ to survive. Another patient arrives with healthy organs. The doctor could save 5 lives by killing the healthy patient and distributing the organs. The outcome mirrors the trolley problem. 1 life is sacrificed to save 5. Yet this scenario feels deeply immoral. Most people believe doctors must protect every patient and never kill one to save others. Why? Trust. If doctors started choosing who to sacrifice, everyone would fear entering a hospital. Society relies on rules and rights, not pure math. That is a deontological stance at work. It protects individuals, even if it sometimes leads to worse outcomes. But we also accept some utilitarian decisions. In public policy, resources go to programs that help the most people. Emergency workers triage patients, giving priority to those most likely to survive. These decisions resemble pulling the lever. They aim to maximize benefits with limited resources. Yet even in these cases, we avoid targeting specific people for harm. The difference lies in whether harm is intended or unavoidable. Self-driving cars face modern versions of the trolley problem. If a car must choose between swerving to avoid a group and hitting one person on the sidewalk, how should it react? Should the designers program the car to save the most lives, or should it avoid intentionally steering into anyone? These decisions require balancing outcomes and rules. Machines must act on principles we define, so society must decide which values to encode. The trolley problem pushes us to confront these values. Another scenario explores personal relationships. Imagine the one person on the sidetrack is your child. The 5 people are strangers. Would you still pull the lever? Many people would not. This challenges the idea that each life holds equal moral weight in every situation. It introduces personal loyalty. Humans value loved ones differently. This complicates moral theory, but reflects real behavior. Morality does not exist in a vacuum. It lives in human experience, shaped by emotion, connection, and responsibility. The trolley problem does not offer one correct answer. Instead, it forces us to reflect on what matters more: outcomes or intentions. If we always follow outcomes, we risk justifying harmful actions as long as they produce more benefits. If we always follow rules, we risk allowing preventable harm because we refuse to act. Most people try to balance both. They believe in moral rules, but allow exceptions in extreme situations. They judge actions not only by results, but also by intention, context, and respect for each person involved. Even the difference between action and inaction plays a role. Some people believe failing to act when you could save lives is as bad as causing harm. Others see a moral gap between letting something happen and making it happen. This belief protects individuals from constant moral burden. If we were responsible for every preventable harm we did not stop, we would live under constant guilt. Yet society still expects us to help when we can. This balance shapes laws and social expectations. The trolley problem also exposes how moral decisions can create emotional conflict. You might pull the lever, but still feel regret. You might refuse to pull it, but still feel guilty. Morality is not about feeling good. It is about making choices we can justify. even when every option involves loss. It shows that moral reasoning demands both thought and empathy. In daily life, we rarely face runaway trolleys, but we do face choices that affect others. People in leadership make policy decisions that help some and harm others. Parents make decisions that shape their children's lives. Engineers design systems that keep people safe. Each decision carries trade-offs. The trolley problem is a tool that helps us notice those trade-offs instead of ignoring them. When we ask whether it is moral to sacrifice one to save five, we are really asking a deeper question. How do we value human life, and what are we willing to do in the name of saving others? The answer depends on how we weigh actions against outcomes, rules against results, and individuals against the greater good. The trolley problem does not solve morality. It reveals that morality is complex and often uncomfortable. It asks us to face that complexity with honesty, clarity, and care for every life on the track. Lying seems simple on the surface. You say something that you know is not true. Most people grow up hearing that lying is wrong. Honesty builds trust, and without trust, relationships and communities fall apart. Yet life is full of messy situations where telling the truth might cause pain or even danger. This raises a hard question. Is lying always wrong, even when lying protects someone from harm? Consider a common scenario. A friend asks if you like their artwork. You think it looks bad, but you know they worked hard and are sensitive about it. If you tell the truth, you risk hurting their confidence. If you lie, you protect their feelings. Many people would choose to lie in this case. The lie seems small and kind. It avoids emotional harm. But now imagine a different situation. A doctor lies to a patient about a terminal diagnosis to keep them calm. This lie removes the patient's right to make decisions about their own life. The lie protects them from fear, but it also takes away their freedom. The same act, lying, feels different depending on what is at stake. This tension is the root of the problem. Lying can protect, but it can also disrespect. Truth and care often pull in opposite directions. Some people argue that lying is still wrong even when it leads to good results. This view comes from deontological ethics. Deontology says that certain actions, like lying, are wrong in themselves. Immanuel Kant is famous for saying you should never lie, not even to save a life. He believed that lying treats people as objects instead of as rational individuals. If you lie to someone, you take away their ability to make informed choices. For deontologists, moral rules exist to protect human dignity. Breaking those rules damages morality itself. But most people are not strict rule followers. They use a more flexible view called consequentialism. Consequentialism says the morality of an action depends on its results. If lying leads to a better outcome than telling the truth, then the lie is acceptable. The classic example involves hiding someone from a violent attacker. If the attacker asks where the person is, most people would lie. The lie protects an innocent life. Almost no one believes telling the truth in this scenario is the right thing to do. This shows that people often value preventing harm over absolute honesty. Still, relying only on outcomes creates problems. What if someone lies because they believe it will help, but they are wrong about the consequences? Imagine a parent who lies to a child about being adopted, thinking it protects them. Years later, the child finds out the truth and feels deeply betrayed. The original lie may have prevented short-term discomfort, but it caused long-term damage. This example shows that even protective lies can harm trust. Once trust is broken, it is hard to repair. Trust is a key reason society expects honesty. When lying becomes common, no one knows what to believe. Relationships collapse, business fails, governments lose legitimacy. Lying may seem harmless when it helps someone, but widespread lying can make people suspicious and divided. This raises a concern. If we accept lying to prevent harm, how do we stop people from lying whenever it feels convenient? Where do we draw the line? One way to think about it is by looking at intent. Why is the lie being told? Is it to protect someone from unfair harm? Or is it to avoid responsibility, gain advantage, or hide wrongdoing? A lie told to protect a friend from violence is not the same as a lie told to protect yourself from embarrassment. Intent matters because it reveals whether the lie serves others or serves yourself. People tend to forgive lies told out of care more than lies told out of selfishness. Another factor is the size of the lie. Some lies are small and temporary. Others are large and long-lasting. A small lie about liking a meal may not affect trust. A large lie about finances, identity, or loyalty can change a person's life. The larger the lie, the more likely it is to cause harm in the future, even if it prevents harm in the moment. This means lying to protect someone is not always simple. You must consider not just the short-term outcome, but also the long-term effects on trust and autonomy. Culture also shapes how people see lying. In some cultures, telling a polite lie is normal. It shows respect. In others, even small lies are shameful. Some cultures value harmony over blunt honesty, while others see honesty as the foundation of integrity. These differences show that moral rules around lying are not universal. Yet most cultures still agree that lies with harmful intent are wrong. Consider moral gray areas. Imagine a child asks if everything will be okay during a dangerous storm. The parent might say yes, even if they are unsure. The lie provides comfort and keeps the child calm. Is this wrong? Or is it part of the parent's duty to protect? Some people argue that not all truths must be told at all times. Timing and delivery matter. Telling the truth in a harsh way can be as harmful as lying. Perhaps the issue is not just honesty versus dishonesty, but also compassion versus cruelty. Now think about secrets. Withholding information is not exactly lying, but it can have similar effects. If a company hides risks from its workers to prevent panic, is that protecting them or endangering them? If someone keeps a friend's secret to protect their privacy, that seems moral. If someone keeps a crime secret to protect a criminal, that seems immoral. Again, intent and outcome both matter. This shows there may not be a perfect rule that covers every case. Some people propose a middle path. They say lying is generally wrong because it weakens trust, but they allow rare exceptions when lying prevents serious harm and no honest option can protect. This approach treats honesty as a default, not an absolute. It demands caution and reflection before lying. The person must ask, is this lie necessary? Is there a truthful way to protect instead? Am I willing to take responsibility if the lie causes harm later? This attitude shows moral maturity. It recognizes that lying has a cost, even when it helps. Examples in history reveal how lying can be heroic. People who hid refugees during war lied to authorities to protect lives. Society praises these lies because they resisted injustice. In these cases, lying supported a higher moral duty, protecting human rights. But history also shows how lies can justify oppression. Leaders have lied for the good of the people while actually serving their own power. This kind of lying uses protection as an excuse. It shows why lying, even for good reasons, must be examined with care. Lying to protect is not a question with one easy answer. It demands us to think about trust, intent, harm, and responsibility. Lying can save lives, spare pain, and maintain peace. It can also destroy trust, limit freedom, and cause more harm later. The challenge is not deciding whether lying is always wrong or always right. The challenge is recognizing when protecting others truly justifies bending the truth, and when honesty is the more respectful path, even when it hurts. When you see people suffering or struggling, it feels natural to want to help. Charity is often seen as a moral duty. It gives food, shelter, medicine, and hope to people in need. But life also demands that you take care of yourself. You have bills to pay, energy to manage, goals to pursue, and mental health to maintain. This creates tension. If you could give more to others but choose not to, does that make you selfish? Or is self-care a valid reason to draw limits? Start with a simple case. You pass a charity collector asking for donations. You have enough money to give, but you decide not to. Maybe you want to save for something. Maybe you just don't feel like it. Some people would call that selfish. But is it? You are not causing harm. You are choosing to keep what you earned. Most people agree that giving is good, but not required. When charity is voluntary, refusing to give is not automatically immoral. The judgment depends on how much you have and how much others need. This becomes harder when differences in wealth are extreme. Imagine you have more than enough for comfort. You spend money on luxuries. At the same time, someone else cannot afford food or medicine. Philosopher Peter Singer argues that if you can prevent suffering without sacrificing something of equal moral value, you should. According to this view, choosing personal comfort over saving lives is morally wrong. For example, buying expensive clothing while a child dies from hunger seems unfair. Singer claims that distance does not matter. If you would save a drowning child in front of you, why not save a starving child in another country with a small donation? This argument is powerful because it forces us to compare wants to needs. But most people do not live by that strict rule. They give sometimes, but also spend on themselves. Does that mean most people are selfish? Or does it mean morality is more complex than simple sacrifice? A key factor is sustainability. If you give so much that you struggle, you cannot continue helping. If you ignore your health or mental state, you burn out. Helping others should not destroy you. Self-care is not indulgence. It maintains your ability to function. Even airline safety instructions tell you to secure your own oxygen mask before helping others. You cannot save anyone if you cannot breathe. There is also a difference between responsibility and generosity. You are responsible for your own life. You are responsible for dependents like children or elderly parents. You are not personally responsible for solving global poverty. Charity helps, but it cannot replace systems and policies. Some people feel guilty because they cannot solve every problem. But solving every problem is not an individual task. It requires governments, institutions, and communities. Feeling endless guilt does not feed anyone. It only drains you. Still, people often judge themselves harshly. They think, I could give more, and guilt follows. But consider the difference between could and should. You could give up vacations, new clothes, or entertainment. But should you? Is joy not important? Is rest not valuable? A life without pleasure or growth is not healthy. You are not a machine for producing charity. You are a human being with needs and desires. Wanting a good life is not selfish. The problem is not wanting comfort. The problem is ignoring suffering completely. A balanced view allows for both care for self and care for others. You can set limits without rejecting generosity. You can give thoughtfully instead of constantly. You can choose causes that matter to you. You can give money, time, skills, or support. Charity is more than donations. It includes mentoring, listening, or helping a neighbor. It includes advocating for fair systems. It includes treating people with respect. Some of these acts cost little but create great impact. Now consider a scenario. A nurse works long shifts helping patients. She earns modest pay. She comes home exhausted. She does not donate much money, but she spends her days caring for others. Is she selfish for not giving more financially? Of course not. Her contribution is already significant. Effort matters as much as resources. Intent matters as much as action. Charity is not only about writing checks. It is about living with compassion. Here is another scenario. A billionaire donates millions to charity but treats employees poorly and avoids taxes. Is that person generous or selfish? Large donations look good, but if the wealth was built by exploiting others, the charity may cover deeper harm. This shows that giving does not always equal moral goodness. Context matters. Motivation matters. Sometimes real moral action comes from fairness, not generosity. Society often praises extreme charity. Stories of people who give away everything inspire us. But these examples can create pressure. They set a standard that most people cannot meet. If morality requires sacrifice of all personal goals, then morality becomes impossible. A moral system that demands perfection is unrealistic. A better approach is one that encourages consistent, meaningful, sustainable giving without erasing personal well-being. There is also the issue of proximity. People naturally care more about those close to them. You might spend money on your child's education instead of donating to a stranger. Is that wrong? Most would say no. Taking care of family is a moral duty. Love is not selfish. But what if the amount spent on luxuries for a loved one could save a life elsewhere? This is the hard edge of the question. Emotional bonds shape moral choices. Humans are not neutral calculators. We value personal relationships. Some philosophers argue that it is moral to prioritize loved ones because relationships create obligations. Others argue that impartiality is more ethical. Real life often blends both views. The fear of being called selfish can lead to two unhealthy extremes. One extreme is overgiving, sacrificing personal needs, burning out, and resenting others. The other extreme is apathy, refusing to help anyone and closing your eyes to suffering. Neither extreme is wise. The goal is not perfection, but responsibility. You are responsible to do something, not everything. What does giving more even mean? For some, giving $5 is generous. For others, giving thousands is easy. The label selfish should not depend on raw numbers. It should depend on honesty. Are you ignoring others because you do not care? Or are you balancing your resources with awareness and intention? Some people give quietly without recognition. Others give loudly to boost their image. True generosity is not about appearance. It is about empathy and respect. Self-care and charity can support each other. When you are healthy and secure, you can give more effectively. When you give in ways that align with your strengths, you feel energized. Helping others can even improve your own well-being. Acts of giving can create connection and purpose. The key is choice, not coercion. Charity should come from willingness, not shame. Asking whether you are selfish for not giving more assumes there is a clear line between enough and not enough. But morality is not a simple score. It is a constant balance of care for self and care for others. You can live a good life and still help those in need. You can protect your well-being and still be generous. You can set boundaries and still act with compassion. The question is not how much you give, but whether you live with awareness of others and a willingness to act when you can. Imagine living in a neighborhood with clean streets, working lights, and safe parks. You enjoy these benefits every day, but you never help maintain them. You do not pick up trash, pay fees, or volunteer. Others do the work, but you still get the advantages. This is the free rider problem. A free rider benefits from a shared system without contributing to it. The question is whether that is always wrong, or if there are situations where free riding seems acceptable, or even unavoidable. At first, the answer seems clear. If everyone took without giving, the system would collapse. Clean streets, safe communities, public transportation, and even stable governments rely on shared effort. People pay taxes, follow rules, and do their part. When someone benefits without contributing, it feels unfair. Others carry the load while the free rider relaxes. This violates the principle of reciprocity. If you receive something, you should give something back. In small groups, free riders create resentment. In large systems, too many free riders can cause failure. But real life is more complicated. Not all systems are voluntary. You do not choose whether roads are paved or whether firefighters protect your home. You were born into a society that provides certain services whether you ask for them or not. You may not even have the option to opt out. If contribution is not optional, is using the system without paying still wrong? Consider people who do not pay taxes because they are too poor. They still rely on police, schools, and hospitals. Are they free riders? Most people would say no. They are not refusing to contribute. They are unable to. Ability matters. Morality changes when contribution is impossible or unfair. Now imagine someone who could contribute but chooses not to. A person who makes good money but hides income to avoid taxes. They use roads, benefit from national defense, and enjoy a stable economy. They let others fund these things. In this case, most would say the free rider is acting selfishly. The problem is not using the system. The problem is refusing to share the burden. This shows intent matters. Being unable to contribute is different from refusing to contribute. Free riding also appears in everyday situations. Think about group projects in school or team tasks at work. One person does nothing but still gets credit. This frustrates everyone else. It feels unjust because the lazy member gains the same reward without effort. The emotional response to free riding comes from a deep sense of fairness. Humans evolved in groups where cooperation was essential. People who took advantage of others threatened survival. Our instinct tells us that free riders are dangerous to group harmony. However, sometimes free riding seems harmless. Imagine a bus that will run whether you board it or not. If you sneak a ride without paying, the system does not collapse. One rider does not change anything. This logic tempts people. My contribution doesn't matter, so why bother? This is the heart of the free rider problem. If everyone thinks this way, the system fails. Systems depend on trust that people will do their part even when individual actions seem small. Some people argue that free riding can be justified when the system itself is unjust. For example, if a government uses tax money to support harmful policies, someone might refuse to pay out of moral protest. They still use roads and services, but they do so because they believe the system is flawed. Is this free riding or resistance? Morality is not just about following rules. It is also about questioning unfair structures. In these cases, free riding becomes a form of dissent. Still, even justified resistance raises questions. If you refuse to contribute, are you placing more burden on others who may also disagree but still pay? Another layer is consent. If you never agreed to a system, are you obligated to support it? Think about social expectations. People expect you to help your community, vote, recycle, or volunteer, but maybe you never chose these duties. Some philosophers say you only owe contributions if you agreed to the system's benefits. Others argue that by accepting the benefits, you implicitly agree to the obligations. This debate shows that consent is not always clear in real life. Free riding also appears in global issues like climate change. The environment is a shared system. Some countries pollute heavily, while others work hard to cut emissions. Nations that avoid responsibility while enjoying clean air are acting as global free riders. The problem becomes urgent when the stakes are survival. Here, free riding is not just unfair, it is dangerous. Cooperation is necessary for the planet's future. Yet people also worry about exploitation from the other side. What if the system takes more than it gives? What if contributions are demanded without equal benefit? A person might feel like a sucker for contributing while others waste resources or misuse power. This leads to the question, why should I contribute if others are cheating? When trust breaks down, more people become free riders. This creates a cycle of decline. The challenge is not just stopping free riders, but also building systems that feel fair and transparent. There are times when benefiting without contributing is normal and accepted. Children benefit from families without contributing. New employees learn from experienced coworkers. Patients receive care even if they cannot pay. Society recognizes that some people need support before they can contribute. Contribution can be delayed until someone has the ability to give back. This brings up a more generous way to think about contribution. Maybe contribution is not always financial or direct. Some people help by caring for others, creating art, spreading knowledge, or building morale. They may not pay into the system in obvious ways, but they enrich it. A quiet neighbor who keeps peace may contribute more than someone who pays but behaves poorly. Contribution can be hidden or informal. Still, there are clear cases where free riding is harmful. When someone refuses to help, exploits others, and takes all they can get, their actions weaken the group. This kind of free riding is morally wrong because it disrespects the efforts of others and invites collapse. The line between acceptable and unacceptable free riding depends on intent, ability, fairness, and impact. People are willing to contribute when they feel connected to others and believe their efforts matter. They resist when systems feel distant, corrupt, or unfair. The best systems encourage contribution through trust and shared purpose, not just obligation. When people see themselves as part of something bigger, free riding loses its appeal. Benefiting from a system you do not contribute to is not always wrong. Sometimes it is necessary. Sometimes it is harmless. Sometimes it is even justified. But when refusal to contribute undermines fairness, burdens others, or threatens the system itself, it becomes a moral problem. The free rider question forces us to examine not just what we take, but how we live together, how we share responsibility, and what we owe each other in a world built on cooperation. Imagine someone trying to do the right thing. They care, they try, they act with kindness, but their actions end up hurting someone. Now the question appears, are they still moral because they meant well, or are they responsible for the harm they caused? This question cuts deep into how we judge others and ourselves. It challenges the idea that morality is only about intention or only about results. Real life shows that both matter, but deciding which matters more is not easy. Start with a simple case. A friend gives advice to help someone through a difficult time. They believe the advice will help. Instead, the person feels worse and makes a harmful decision because of it. The friend had good intentions. They were trying to support, but their advice caused harm. Do we call them immoral? Most people would say no. They made a mistake, not a moral failure. In this example, the harm was unintentional and based on limited information. Still, the outcome was negative. The friend may feel guilt even though they meant well. This shows that intention protects someone from blame, but it does not erase the consequences. Now think about a doctor who chooses a treatment that seems safe but has unknown risks. The treatment harms the patient. The doctor followed training and tried to heal. Should we judge the doctor as immoral? Probably not. The doctor acted based on the best information available. In professional settings, We accept that outcomes are not always predictable. We judge competence and intention. If the doctor ignored warnings or failed to research, the judgment changes. Negligence is different from innocent error. Morality considers effort and responsibility, not just results. Intent and outcome collide even more in parenting. A parent might protect a child by controlling their choices, believing it keeps them safe, but the child grows up anxious and dependent. The parent meant well, but caused harm. We may not call them immoral, but we can still say the harm was real. Good intentions do not automatically equal good parenting. This example reveals that morality involves more than kindness. It involves wisdom, humility, and awareness of long-term effects. Wanting to help is not enough. You must also understand how to help. Some people believe morality is mainly about intention. They argue that you can only control your intentions, not all outcomes. If someone acts out of care, honesty, or duty, they are moral, even if things go wrong. This approach values character. A moral person is someone who tries to do the right thing for the right reasons. This view protects people from harsh blame when life is unpredictable. But it raises a problem. If outcomes do not matter, does harm become irrelevant? Surely the person who is harmed still matters. Others argue that morality should focus on outcomes. If your actions hurt people, the effects count more than your motives. If a policy meant to help the poor makes them poorer, it is a bad policy, regardless of intentions. This view is common in public decisions. Leaders are judged by results. Lives and livelihoods depend on outcomes, not personal sincerity. But this approach creates its own problem. If outcomes are all that matter, someone could be morally praised for doing good by accident, even if they were careless or selfish. That feels wrong too. So morality cannot rely only on intention or only on outcome. Humans judge both. When someone causes harm, we ask, did they mean to do it? Did they try to avoid it? Did they act responsibly? Did they learn from it? These questions help us tell the difference between an honest mistake, reckless behavior, and intentional harm. Responsibility plays a key role. If someone acts without thinking about the consequences, even with good intentions, they may still be morally at fault. For example, a volunteer brings food to a community without checking dietary needs. Some people get sick. The volunteer meant to help, but they skipped important steps. They did not research or ask questions. This is careless. Good intentions do not excuse carelessness. Morality requires more than warm feelings. It requires effort to understand the impact of your actions. But what if someone truly could not predict the harm? Consider a person who donates to a charity they believe helps people. Later they learn the charity was corrupt. They unintentionally supported exploitation. Are they immoral? No. They acted in good faith with no way to know the outcome. Once they learn the truth, their response matters. If they stop supporting the charity and warn others, they act morally. If they ignore the harm because it is inconvenient, their morality becomes questionable. Growth matters. A moral person learns and adapts. Emotions influence how we judge these situations. If someone hurts us, their intent might not matter to us at first. Pain makes outcome feel more important than motive. But with time and reflection, we often soften our judgment if we see the person meant no harm. This shows morality involves empathy. We try to understand both sides, the harmed person and the person who caused the harm. Legal systems also separate intention from outcome. Accidents and crimes are treated differently. Killing someone on purpose leads to harsher punishment than causing death by accident. Yet even accidental harm can require restitution. This shows society recognizes that while intent affects moral blame, Outcomes still demand accountability. You may not be evil, but you may still need to repair the damage. There are cases where people hide behind good intentions to escape criticism. A person might say, "I was just trying to help," to avoid responsibility, but intent should not be a shield. If harm is predictable and preventable, then claiming good intentions is not enough. For example, someone might speak honestly but in a cruel way, claiming they were trying to help others improve. If their honesty humiliates more than it helps, the intention does not fully excuse them. Morality requires awareness of impact. Think about big historical events. Some leaders believed their actions would improve society, but caused great suffering. They said they meant well, but their plans ignored human cost. History judges them not just by intent, but by outcome and arrogance. Good intentions without wisdom can become dangerous. This shows that morality includes responsibility to think critically and listen to others before acting on big decisions. On the other hand, some people create positive change even when they fail at first. They try, fail, adjust, and try again. Their intentions drive them, but they respect outcomes and learn. This kind of morality is active, humble, and accountable. It accepts that impact matters as much as motive. So is someone moral if they meant well but caused harm? They might still be moral in character, but the harm still counts. Intent shapes how we judge their heart. Outcome shapes how we judge their action. True morality requires both care in our motives and caution in our effects. It demands that we not only mean well, but also act with responsibility, reflection, and willingness to repair what we break. Morality is not just about trying to do good. It is about doing good in a thoughtful, accountable way, even when things do not go as planned. Imagine someone trying to hurt another person. Their motive is selfish, spiteful, or cruel. But something unexpected happens. Instead of causing harm, their action produces a good result. Maybe the person they targeted ends up stronger or more successful because of it. Now the question appears, is the person who acted with bad intentions still immoral, even though the outcome was good? This question flips the usual debates about morality. Instead of asking if good intentions excuse harm, it asks if bad intentions condemn someone regardless of outcome. At first, the answer seems obvious. Intention reveals character. If someone tries to hurt others, that reflects their values. Even if the outcome turns out positive, their original aim was destructive. We do not call someone generous because their theft accidentally led to a charity receiving funds. We do not call someone kind because their gossip accidentally exposed wrongdoing. The outcome does not change the fact that the person wanted to do something wrong. Morality is not only about what happens, but about why someone acted the way they did. Think of a simple example. A student spreads a rumor to ruin a classmate's reputation. Instead, the rumor draws attention to the classmate's talent, and teachers offer new opportunities. The classmate benefits. But does that make the rumor spreader moral? Most people would say no. The student tried to cause harm. The good outcome was a fluke. The intent was malicious. Morality should not be determined by luck. Now consider another scenario. An employee at a company leaks information to damage a rival coworker. The leak exposes corruption in the company, and the rival is praised for bringing attention to it. The company improves its policies. Again, the outcome is good. But the employee who leaked had no interest in justice. They only wanted to hurt someone. Society might appreciate the result, but we would still see the employee's action as immoral. They are not heroes. They are accidental catalysts. This shows why many people believe intent matters more than outcome for moral judgment. If morality is only about results, then someone who tries to harm but fails could be considered good just because things turned out well, but that does not feel right. We do not admire people who get lucky. We admire people who act with integrity. A moral system based only on outcomes would allow harmful motives to go unchallenged, as long as the outcome appears beneficial. That would reward recklessness and dishonesty. On the other hand, some people argue that outcomes do matter. They say actions should be judged by what they produce, not just what someone was thinking. If a harmful intention leads to a better world, is the person truly as bad as someone who intends harm and succeeds? Consequences affect real lives. Intentions exist in the mind. This view is common in politics and law, where results often overshadow motives. A policy that improves society may be praised even if passed for selfish reasons. But even in those cases, we tend to separate praise for the outcome from praise for the person. We may value the result while still distrusting the motive. One way to think about it is to separate moral credit from moral blame. People deserve moral credit when they try to do good, even if they fail. They deserve moral blame when they try to do harm, even if they fail. The outcome may influence the level of blame, but not the existence of blame. For example, someone who tries to poison someone but accidentally drops the poison and spills it is still considered dangerous and immoral. The fact that no one got hurt does not make them good. Intention reveals moral direction, but some cases are less clear. Imagine someone speaks harshly to another person intending to humiliate them. Instead, the person reflects on the criticism and grows stronger. The target thanks them. The original speaker might even feel confused. They wanted to hurt, but they accidentally helped. Should they still be judged as immoral? Probably yes, but we might judge them less harshly than if their words had actually caused serious harm. Outcome affects the weight of the judgment, not its nature. Now consider a prank. Someone sets up a trap to embarrass a coworker. The trap accidentally prevents the coworker from walking into a dangerous situation and saves them from injury. Should we call the prankster a savior? Of course not. They were not acting out of care or caution. The positive result is pure accident. The prankster's character remains questionable. These examples show that luck plays a big role in outcomes. If morality depended only on results, luck would become more important than values. That feels wrong. Morality should not depend on chance. It should reflect what people choose to do and why. But what if the harmful intent leads to genuine, lasting good? Consider a historical case. A corrupt leader starts a war to gain power, but accidentally unites oppressed groups who overthrow him and build a better society. Should the leader be seen as moral? Almost no one would say yes. His intent was destructive. The good result came from the response of others, not from his moral vision. People can create conditions for good without being good themselves. Moral credit should go to those who choose to do good, not to those who accidentally start the chain. There is also the issue of trust. Someone who means harm cannot be trusted, even if their past actions led to good outcomes. Moral character is about patterns of intention. If their motive is consistently to damage others, they remain dangerous. Outcomes can hide motives temporarily, but behavior driven by harmful intent will likely cause real damage eventually. We judge morality to protect people, not to reward coincidences. Even so, it is worth asking whether outcomes should have any influence on how harshly we judge someone. If someone tries to do something terrible, but ends up causing no actual harm, many legal and moral systems judge them less severely than if harm occurred. Attempted murder is punished, but actual murder is punished more. This shows we care about both intention and impact. The intent makes the act immoral. The outcome shapes the degree of blame. Now consider personal growth. If someone acts with bad intentions, but later reflects on the result and changes their character, their morality can evolve. They may learn that their motives were harmful and choose to change. A person is not trapped forever by one intention. Morality is not only about past actions, but also about future direction. However, this growth only matters if they acknowledge their intent was wrong. If they point to the good outcome as proof they were right, they miss the moral lesson. Bad intent with good outcome creates a moral paradox only if we confuse success with virtue. Someone can succeed at doing harm and still fail morally. Someone can fail at causing harm and still fail morally. Morality belongs to the motive and the effort to act with integrity. Outcomes shape the consequences we must address, but not the core of moral judgment. So if someone meant harm but accidentally helped, they are still acting from a place of immorality. The good outcome does not make them good. It may reduce the damage, but it does not redeem the motive. Morality requires more than producing good results. It requires the desire to do what is right. Without that, even accidental success does not make someone moral. When someone causes harm, two powerful responses often collide: the desire for justice and the desire for forgiveness. Justice seeks fairness. It demands accountability, consequences, and restoration. Forgiveness releases anger, lets go of resentment, and offers the person who caused harm a chance to move forward. At first glance, these two ideas seem to pull in opposite directions. If you forgive fully, does that erase the need for justice? If you pursue full justice, does that make forgiveness impossible? The tension between the two is deep because both come from real human needs. People need fairness, but they also need healing. The hard question is whether both can exist at the same time. Start with a simple case. Someone steals money from you. Justice would mean they repay what they stole, face consequences, or at least admit wrongdoing. Forgiveness would mean you release the anger and no longer wish them harm. You might forgive them in your heart, but still believe they should return the money. In this example, justice and forgiveness can both exist. You can let go of hatred while still expecting accountability. This shows that forgiveness does not always mean ignoring what happened. It can live alongside consequences. But this is an easy scenario. Real life becomes harder when harm runs deeper. Think about violent crimes. If someone assaults or kills, society demands justice. Punishment protects others, affirms the victim's dignity, and shows that the wrongdoing matters. But some victims choose to forgive even serious offenses. They may not oppose legal consequences, but they no longer hold personal bitterness. Some even advocate for reduced punishment. People sometimes see forgiveness as weakness, but in many cases it takes strength. Still, can forgiveness and justice both be complete in such cases? If forgiveness means letting go, and justice means balancing the scales, can the scales stay balanced when mercy enters? Much depends on how we define justice. If justice means revenge or equal pain, then forgiveness cannot coexist with it. Full revenge leaves no room for grace. But if justice means restoration, repairing harm, restoring dignity, rebuilding safety, then forgiveness may even support justice. In restorative justice systems, offenders face consequences, but also must understand their actions, make amends, and re-enter the community with accountability. In this model, forgiveness does not erase justice. It helps transform it. The goal is not punishment alone, but healing for both sides. However, some people believe justice must be harsh to be fair. They see forgiveness as letting people get away with wrongdoing. They fear that forgiving too easily encourages repeated harm. Forgiveness without responsibility can become dangerous. For example, if someone repeatedly lies or abuses others and the victims keep forgiving without consequences, the offender learns nothing. That fake forgiveness becomes a cover for continued harm. Real forgiveness should not protect wrongdoing. It should face it honestly. On the other hand, justice without forgiveness can trap both the victim and the offender in the past. If the victim cannot let go emotionally, they may carry anger and pain for life. If the offender serves their sentence, but is forever hated and excluded, they may never change. Justice alone can correct the wrong, but it may not repair the heart. Forgiveness alone can release pain, but it may not correct the wrong. Both seem incomplete on their own, but combining them requires balance and wisdom. Consider a real situation. A drunk driver kills someone. The legal system charges them, and they go to prison. The family of the victim supports the sentence because justice matters. But over time, they decide to forgive the driver personally. They do not fight the punishment. They do not deny the harm. They simply choose to let go of hatred. In this case, justice and forgiveness both happen. The offender is held responsible. The family finds peace. This shows that forgiveness does not always erase consequences. It changes the emotional and moral relationship between people while allowing justice to take its course. But what if forgiveness leads to reducing or removing punishment? Can that still be justice? Some say yes, if the offender shows remorse, accepts responsibility, and works to repair damage. In these cases, mercy may be part of justice. Others say no, justice must remain firm or it loses integrity. This shows that people have different ideas of fairness. Some focus on law, others focus on restoration. Some center the victim, others center society. Forgiveness interacts with each of these differently. Power differences also matter. If a powerful person harms someone and asks for forgiveness to avoid consequences, that is manipulation. In that case, forgiveness without justice protects the strong and harms the weak. True forgiveness cannot exist when pressure or guilt forces it. The victim must have the right to choose. Justice ensures the victim is protected. Without justice, forgiveness can be used as a weapon. Culture influences the relationship between justice and forgiveness. Some cultures value harmony and encourage forgiveness for the sake of peace. Others value law and demand strict consequences to maintain order. Religion often teaches forgiveness as a moral duty, but religious traditions also have systems of justice. Even in faith communities, forgiveness without accountability is seen as unhealthy. There is also the question of timing. Justice often acts in the present to address the past. Forgiveness sometimes requires time and distance. People may not be ready to forgive right away. Forcing forgiveness early can be harmful. True forgiveness is voluntary. It cannot be demanded. Justice, however, can be enforced, even when emotions are raw. This difference in timing can make harmony between the two difficult. Justice may happen before forgiveness is possible. In some cases, people forgive even when justice never arrives. Victims may never see consequences for the offender. They forgive to protect their own peace. In these cases, forgiveness fills the void left by injustice. But does that mean justice and forgiveness coexisted? Not really. One replaced the other. The victim chose healing when fairness failed. That act is powerful, but it does not resolve the tension. It shows that forgiveness can survive without justice, but it may have to carry unbearable weight. Full justice suggests that the harm has been fully addressed, the scales balanced, and the wrong acknowledged. Full forgiveness suggests the emotional burden has been released, and the relationship, at least internally, has been reset. But maybe full justice in its strictest sense is impossible, because some harm cannot be undone. You cannot bring back a life. You cannot erase trauma. In those cases, justice can only approximate fairness, and forgiveness can only approximate peace. Maybe the idea that both can be full is unrealistic. Instead, both can work together to bring as much healing as possible. Justice protects the world. Forgiveness heals the heart. Both matter. When they respect each other, when justice makes space for mercy and forgiveness honors responsibility, they can coexist, not as opposites, but as partners. The challenge is building systems and relationships where both the need for fairness and the need for grace are seen as human truths, not competing forces. Imagine two drivers. Both are distracted for a moment at the wheel. One driver swerves back into the lane safely. The other hits a pedestrian and kills them. Their actions were the same, but the outcomes were very different. We tend to judge the second driver much more harshly. But is that fair? The difference in outcome was caused by luck, not intention. Moral luck raises a hard question. Should we judge people based on what they did or based on what happened as a result, even when they couldn't control the outcome? At first, it seems obvious that we should judge only actions. After all, morality is about choices. You cannot control luck, so you should not be blamed or praised for things outside your control. In the case of the two drivers, both were careless. If we focus only on the action, they deserve equal blame. Legal systems even acknowledge this. Attempted murder and murder involve similar intent, but the punishment is different because one succeeded and the other did not. Still, many people believe the murderer is worse, even though the difference was luck. This shows that outcome often influences moral judgment, even when we think it should not. Moral luck appears in many forms. There is outcome luck, like the drivers. There is circumstantial luck, where someone faces a situation others never face. A person who lived during war might commit acts others never had to consider. There is constitutive luck, like personality traits you did not choose. You might be naturally patient or naturally quick-tempered. These traits affect your behavior, but you did not select them. If morality depends on choice, how do we judge someone whose choices were shaped by experiences or traits they never chose? Even effort and discipline are partly influenced by upbringing and environment. Moral luck shows how much of our lives lie outside our control, even when we think we are acting freely. Consider heroism. A firefighter runs into a burning building and saves lives. We praise them. But what if another firefighter, just as brave, never faces a fire? They never get the chance to be a hero. Are they less moral? Or did they simply lack the opportunity? Praising someone for courage seems right, but courage can only appear in the right circumstances. Luck determines who gets the chance to be heroic. So even moral praise depends on events outside control. Now look at parenting. One parent works hard and raises a successful child. Another works just as hard, but their child struggles with addiction or illness. Society often praises the first and judges the second, as if effort always leads to outcome. But life does not work that way. Skill and dedication matter, but luck plays a role. If we judge only by result, we might misjudge character. Still, outcomes matter. If someone causes real harm, we cannot ignore it. The pedestrian is dead. The child is injured. The community suffers. Outcomes exist in reality, not theory. That is why people feel differently toward the driver who killed someone. It is not only about intention. It is also about the weight of what happened. Even if the driver did not mean harm, they changed someone's life forever. Moral judgment often includes responsibility for damage, even when the damage came from luck. This creates tension. If we ignore outcomes, we risk being cold or detached. If we judge only outcomes, we risk being unfair. The challenge is to find a way to judge that respects both intention and consequence. In personal relationships, People tend to care about intention first. If a friend accidentally hurts your feelings, but clearly did not mean to, you are more likely to forgive them. But if the harm is severe, you may still struggle even if you know it was accidental. Emotionally, outcome and intention both matter. Morality follows a similar pattern. Legal systems try to handle this balance. They consider intention, negligence, and outcome. Someone who tried to harm is worse than someone who caused harm by accident, but someone who caused harm still faces consequences. Law separates guilt from punishment. Guilt depends on action and intent, while punishment often reflects outcome. Morality may work in a similar way. We can judge someone's character based on their actions and motives, while still holding them responsible for harmful outcomes in practical terms. Yet moral luck goes deeper than accidents. Think of someone born into poverty, violence, or neglect. Their chances of making moral choices are affected by their environment. Someone raised in safety may find it easier to be honest and kind. Someone raised in chaos may learn survival tactics that break social rules. If we judge both people equally without context, we ignore luck. But if we excuse everything because of luck, we remove responsibility. Neither extreme works. Morality requires recognizing both influence and agency. People are shaped by forces beyond their control, but they also make choices within those limits. Even success involves luck. Two business owners work equally hard. One succeeds because the market rises. The other fails because the market crashes. Society often praises the successful one as smarter or more disciplined, but luck played a major role. Does this mean moral judgment of success is flawed? To some extent, yes. We often mistake luck for virtue. Morality reminds us to stay humble when we succeed and compassionate when others fail. Some philosophers argue that pure morality should ignore luck completely. They believe only internal choices matter: intentions, principles, effort. By this view, the two drivers are equally moral or immoral. But most people do not live this way. Outcome shapes how we see actions. If a surgeon takes a risky step that saves a life, we call them brave. If the same step kills the patient, we call them reckless. The action is the same. The outcome changes everything. This inconsistency is built into human judgment. Maybe the problem is expecting moral judgment to be simple. Perhaps we need layers. We can judge intention to understand character. We can judge action to understand responsibility. We can judge outcome to understand impact. All three matter, but in different ways. Moral luck shows that life is not fair. Some people get blamed more or praised more because of chance. The question is whether we accept that unfairness or fight it. In close relationships, many people judge intention most. In public systems, outcomes carry more weight. In personal reflection, we judge ourselves harshly when outcomes are bad, even if we tried our best. Moral luck affects how we feel about guilt and pride. Someone who almost caused a tragedy may feel deep guilt forever, even though luck prevented disaster. Someone who did cause harm may be forgiven by others if the outcome was clearly beyond their control, but still feel guilty. The inner moral world does not always match outer judgment. So how should we judge? We might start by asking what judgment is for. If the goal is to understand character, we judge intention. If the goal is to repair harm, we judge outcome. If the goal is to guide future behavior, we judge decisions and effort. Moral luck teaches that people are not entirely authors of their lives. It warns against quick judgment. It encourages humility. It reminds us that we could have done the same thing in different circumstances. It challenges us to see morality not as a simple score, but as a complex blend of choice, consequence, and chance. Imagine two cultures looking at the same behavior. One calls it moral, the other calls it immoral. Who is right? Cultural relativism says morality depends on cultural norms, not universal rules. What one society praises, another may condemn. This idea challenges the belief that there is one correct moral standard for everyone. At first, cultural relativism seems respectful and open-minded. It acknowledges diversity and prevents judging others through a narrow lens, but it also raises a difficult question. Can something truly be both moral and immoral at the same time, depending on where you are? Or is morality deeper than culture? Take a common example, arranged marriage. In some cultures, it is seen as an act of family support and stability. Parents help their children choose a partner to ensure compatibility and long-term success. In other cultures, arranged marriage is seen as controlling or unfair because it appears to limit personal freedom. One culture calls it responsible, another calls it oppressive. Is the practice moral or immoral? If we follow cultural relativism, the answer is both, depending on the cultural lens. But this feels incomplete. What if someone in the arranged marriage feels forced? Should cultural tradition override personal autonomy? Consider another example. Eating certain animals. In some countries, eating dogs is normal. In others, it is unthinkable. People who eat cows may judge those who eat dogs, even though cows are sacred in some cultures. Morality about food is shaped by history, religion, and emotion. Cultural relativism tells us not to impose our food morals on others. But is everything relative, or are there limits? Some cultural practices clearly cause harm, like honor killings, child marriage, or female genital mutilation. These practices are accepted in some cultural contexts, but widely condemned elsewhere. Cultural relativism would say we must respect those practices because they fit their cultural values. But many people reject that. They argue that certain actions violate basic human rights, regardless of culture. They believe some moral principles, like protecting life, autonomy, and dignity, should apply everywhere. This challenges full cultural relativism and points toward moral universalism, the idea that some morals are true for all humans. So where do we draw the line? Cultural relativism helps us understand moral diversity. It reminds us that our own moral beliefs are shaped by our upbringing. It teaches humility. But if we apply it absolutely, we lose the ability to criticize harmful practices. If everything is relative, we cannot say slavery is wrong in any context. We cannot oppose genocide or oppression. That makes cultural relativism dangerous when taken to extremes. Still, moral universalism has its own problems. If we claim there are universal morals, whose morals are they? Western, Eastern, religious, secular? History shows that powerful cultures often force their morals onto others and call it universal truth. This can hide cultural domination behind moral language. For example, colonial powers justified conquest by claiming they were civilizing others. This shows that claiming universal morality can also be abused. The challenge is finding a way to respect cultural differences without accepting all practices as equally moral. Maybe the issue is more complex than choosing between everything is relative and everything is absolute. Morality might have layers. Some values appear in almost every culture, such as fairness, loyalty, protection of children, and opposition to betrayal. However, how those values are expressed can differ. Fairness in one culture might mean equality. In another, it might mean giving more to those with greater responsibility. Both value fairness, but define it differently. This suggests that many moral values may be universal at a basic level, but interpreted through cultural context. Language also plays a role. Words like respect, freedom, and honor carry different meanings in different societies. A culture that values community might sacrifice individual freedom for group harmony. Another culture might protect personal choice, even if it harms the group. Each culture thinks it is being moral. Neither is completely right or wrong. They are navigating different priorities. Cultural relativism helps us see why their moral choices make sense within their worldview. However, cultural norms change over time. What was moral in the past may be immoral today. Slavery was legal and accepted in many societies for centuries. Now most of the world condemns it. Was it moral then, but immoral now? Or was it always immoral, and people just failed to see it? Cultural relativism would suggest morality changed with culture. Moral universalism would say slavery was always wrong, but earlier cultures were mistaken. This shows that cultures are not perfect judges of morality. They can evolve, grow, and correct themselves. If morality were only relative, progress would be impossible. Sometimes the question is not whether the practice itself is moral, but whether the people following it have a choice. Wearing traditional clothing may be cultural pride or forced conformity. Respecting elders may be loving guidance or oppressive authority. The same action can be moral in one setting and immoral in another, depending on freedom, intent, and impact. Culture explains behavior, but does not always justify it. What about individuals within a culture who disagree with their society's morals? If morality comes only from culture, then rebels, reformers, and activists are always immoral. But history celebrates people who challenge their culture to create change, such as those who fought against segregation, caste systems, or gender inequality. Their courage suggests that morality can transcend culture. Sometimes the minority is more moral than the majority. Cultural relativism struggles to explain why moral progress often begins with those who resist cultural norms. Maybe morality lives in both culture and humanity. Culture shapes the surface of morality: customs, symbols, expectations. But beneath that surface lie deeper human concerns: harm, fairness, dignity, freedom, loyalty, safety. Different cultures balance these values in different ways. That is why practices vary. Cultural relativism is useful when cultures express shared values differently. It helps avoid arrogance and shallow judgment. But when a practice ignores basic human well-being or violates consent, we need a moral standard higher than culture. The real challenge is humility combined with courage. We must listen to other cultures and learn why they hold certain values. We must understand before we judge. But understanding does not mean accepting everything. Moral judgment is not about superiority. It is about protecting human dignity wherever it is threatened. Cultural relativism helps us see moral diversity. Moral universalism helps us defend moral responsibility. Something can appear both moral and immoral depending on culture, but deeper examination often reveals shared values and human consequences. A task is not to choose one side, but to navigate the space between respect for differences and commitment to justice. Self-sacrifice is often praised as the highest form of courage. Stories of people who put themselves in danger to protect others inspire respect across cultures and history. Soldiers who run toward gunfire, parents who shield their children, strangers who jump into rivers to save someone from drowning. These acts are called noble. They show love, loyalty, and bravery. But what if the person who sacrifices themselves has children, a spouse, aging parents, or others who rely on them? In that case, dying to save someone else might leave their own family without support. Then a new question appears. Is self-sacrifice noble or irresponsible? Does the moral value depend on who benefits and who pays the cost? Imagine a firefighter entering a burning building. They know the risk. They also know they have a family waiting at home. If they die rescuing a stranger, society calls them a hero. Their family grieves but feels pride. Their sacrifice saved a life. But what if the same person takes an unnecessary risk to look brave rather than relying on safer methods? If they die, people might question the decision. The line between noble and reckless can be thin. Intention matters. So does the level of risk and whether the sacrifice was truly needed. Consider a parent during a crisis. They might rush toward danger to protect their child without hesitation. Few would call that irresponsible. In that moment, the parent's duty to protect overrides all other concerns. But what about a parent who volunteers for a dangerous mission unrelated to their children's safety? Some will admire the courage. Others will ask, should someone with dependents choose a path that risks leaving them behind? Society sends mixed messages. We honor sacrifice, but we also value responsibility. Think about soldiers. Many enlist to protect their country and the people they love. They accept the possibility of death. Some have families. Some die in service. Their nations call them heroes. But critics argue that governments should not expect parents to die and leave their children behind. Others respond that protecting the future of those children sometimes requires sacrifice. In this view, self-sacrifice can be a form of deeper responsibility. They die so others, including their own families, can live in safety. Now consider a different kind of sacrifice. Slow, quiet, everyday sacrifice. A single parent working 2 jobs for their children. They sacrifice rest, dreams, and freedom. They may not die, but they give up parts of themselves. This form of sacrifice rarely makes headlines, yet it is deeply noble. It shows how morality is not only about dramatic life or death decisions. Sometimes living for others is harder than dying for them. This perspective flips the question. Maybe dying is not always the greatest sacrifice. Maybe staying alive and carrying responsibility is harder and more meaningful. But there are moments when immediate danger makes death the only way to save someone. Think of someone pushing another person out of the path of a car. The sacrifice is instant and instinctive. Few would call that irresponsible, even if the rescuer had dependents. Instinctual action feels pure. People rarely judge morality in the middle of reflex, but long-term risks create more complicated moral calculations because there is time to reflect. If someone plans to risk their life, they have to weigh loyalty to those they might save against loyalty to those who depend on them. Culture influences how we see sacrifice. Some cultures glorify martyrdom, dying for a cause. Others teach that preserving your life for your family is the highest duty. Religious traditions often honor self-sacrifice as an act of love. But even in these traditions, intention matters. Sacrificing for pride or recognition is not noble. Sacrificing for genuine compassion is. Yet compassion does not erase consequences. Leaving behind children or parents in need has real effects. How do we measure one life against another? We can examine different kinds of duty. Duty to the many versus duty to the few. A doctor in a crisis might stay behind to treat patients, even if it risks their life. Their family might not want them to, but their duty to society could outweigh personal duty. Others will argue that personal duty should always come first. Is there a correct answer? Or does it depend on what the person values most? Self-sacrifice often raises the question of consent. You can choose to risk your own life, but the people who depend on you did not choose to lose you. If you die, they bear the cost of your choice. Does that make the sacrifice less noble? Some say yes. Morality includes considering the consequences of your actions on all affected. Heroism without responsibility can be selfish in disguise. Others say no. True sacrifice involves accepting that some people will be hurt, but the greater good demands it. The firefighter who dies may leave behind a grieving family, but they might have saved many lives. Can that ever be called irresponsible? The answer may depend on alternatives. If there was another way to help without dying, and someone still chose the deadly path, that might be more irresponsible. But if death was the only option to save others, the sacrifice feels more justified. In moral evaluation, necessity matters. Sacrifice should be purposeful, not reckless. Motivation also matters. Dying for love, loyalty, or principle carries moral weight. Dying for attention, pride, or guilt does not carry the same respect. If someone sacrifices themselves without considering the people who rely on them, some may see it as emotionally immature. True self-sacrifice may require deep wisdom, not just courage. There is also a difference between voluntary and expected sacrifice. When society expects sacrifice from certain people, like healthcare workers or first responders, it raises the question of fairness. Should we praise sacrifice while failing to support or protect those who make it? Calling sacrifice noble can sometimes hide exploitation. If people give their lives because systems are broken, their sacrifice may be noble, but the system is not. This shows that the moral value of sacrifice cannot be separated from context. Sometimes the best thing someone can do for others is survive. Living to provide, teach, guide, and protect may be the truest form of love. People often imagine sacrifice as death, but staying alive through pain, fear, and struggle can be more heroic. A person battling illness to be there for their family is making a sacrifice. So is the person who gives up personal dreams to care for someone. They choose responsibility over individual freedom. That is sacrifice in another form. So is it more noble to die for others, or more responsible to live for them? The answer may be that morality lies not in the act itself, but in the heart behind it and the impact it leaves. Sometimes dying is the highest form of love. Sometimes living is. The real measure of sacrifice is not whether someone dies, but whether their choice reflects courage, wisdom, and care for those who matter. Imagine two situations. In the first, a person pushes someone into danger, and that person gets hurt. In the second, a person watches someone fall into danger and does nothing to stop it, even though they could have helped. Most people believe the first person is worse. They caused harm directly. The second person only allowed harm through inaction. But is doing nothing really better? Is omission morally safer than action? The difference between acting and failing to act is one of the hardest moral questions, because both can lead to the same harm, but our instincts treat them differently. Our moral intuition says pushing someone is worse than not saving them. The person who pushes is active, intentional, and clearly responsible. The bystander may seem passive or detached. We tend to view inaction as neutral, even though the result is still harm. The law often reinforces this view. Most legal systems punish harmful actions much more than harmful omissions. If you shove someone off a bridge, you are guilty. If you walk by and ignore a drowning person, you usually are not legally punished unless you have a special duty, like being a lifeguard or parent. This difference shapes our sense of morality. But laws are designed for order, not always for moral truth. Morality might demand more from us than the law does. Let's go deeper. Imagine a stranger drowning in a shallow pond. You can save them easily without risk. You choose to walk away. Did you cause their death? You did not push them in, but you allowed them to die when you could have prevented it. Philosophers like Peter Singer argue there is no real difference here. Allowing harm when you could prevent it is morally similar to causing harm. The person still suffers. The outcome is the same. From this view, omission can be just as immoral as action because morality cares about lives, not technical details. But many people resist this idea. They say intention matters. Pushing someone into danger shows malicious intent. Walking away might show indifference, fear, or confusion. It does not always mean you wanted harm to occur. Morality is not only about results. It's also about what you meant to do. Someone who acts with the goal of causing harm is more morally blameworthy than someone who freezes in a moment of panic. Intent helps us judge the person, not just the outcome. Still, intention is not the only factor. Responsibility matters too. If you are the only person who can stop harm, your responsibility increases. If a doctor watches a patient die without trying to help, we see this as immoral, because the doctor has a duty to act. If a random passerby watches, the moral judgment is softer, but still uncomfortable. We often excuse omission by saying, "It wasn't my problem." But what if morality requires us to care beyond personal boundaries? Some believe we all have a basic duty to prevent harm when we can do it with little cost. Now consider the difference between failing to help and avoiding responsibility. A leader who ignores warning signs and refuses to act while people suffer has caused harm through omission. History is full of tragedies where harm spread because people in power did nothing. In these cases, omission seems just as guilty as action because the person had the ability and authority to intervene. Their inaction was a choice, even if it looked passive. Sometimes people use omission as a way to avoid blame. For example, someone might refuse to make a decision so that others will suffer the consequences instead. They say, "I didn't do anything," but not doing anything is still a choice. Morally, that choice can be just as powerful as acting. People often hide behind omission to escape responsibility. This is why some philosophers say omission can equal action when the person understands the consequences and chooses inaction anyway. But there is another side. Constantly equating omission with action leads to extreme moral pressure. If failing to help is as bad as causing harm, then any time we do not help someone in need, we are guilty. If you buy something fun instead of donating to save lives, does that make you a killer? This logic can become overwhelming and unrealistic. Human beings have limited energy, resources, and awareness. We cannot help everyone all the time. We naturally draw boundaries around our moral duties. We help family more than strangers. We help nearby more than distant. Is this selfish or is it practical? It might be helpful to ask why omission feels different than action. One reason is effort. Acting takes energy, planning, and risk. Doing nothing feels easier and safer. Our bodies and brains are wired to avoid risk. Action also creates a clear connection between you and the outcome. Omission leaves that connection fuzzier. This psychological distance tricks us into believing we are less responsible when we remain passive. But moral truth may not care about comfort. It may still hold us accountable for harm we allow. Another reason we excuse omission is uncertainty. When we act, we take control. When we do nothing, we may not know what would have happened. Maybe someone else would have helped. Maybe acting would have made things worse. This uncertainty gives omission a built-in excuse. But sometimes uncertainty is just a mask for fear or selfishness. Let's return to everyday life. Imagine two coworkers. One spreads lies that ruin someone's career. The other witnesses the lies, knows the truth, but stays silent to avoid conflict. The first caused direct harm. The second allowed it. Both played a role. Many would say the liar is worse, but the silent coworker still failed morally. Their omission helped the harm succeed. Without silence, the lies would not have worked. Moral responsibility is not always about who acted, but who enabled the outcome. At the same time, acting is not always better. Sometimes action can be harmful, even when meant to help. A person might intervene in a conflict without understanding and make things worse. Moral action requires wisdom, not just effort. Doing something is not always more moral than doing nothing. Sometimes restraint is the right choice. The key is whether the inaction protects others or just protects yourself. There are times when omission is worse than action. Think of bullying. If a bully acts, the bystanders watch. Studies show that victims often suffer more from being abandoned by bystanders than from the bully's attack. Inaction communicates approval or indifference. It isolates the victim. In these cases, doing nothing adds to the harm. Silence becomes cruelty, even if not intentional. Morality is not just about physical motion. It is about choices and consequences. Action and omission are both choices. The difference is not in movement, but in responsibility, intention, and awareness. Some omissions are excusable: lack of knowledge, lack of ability, fear. Some are not: deliberate avoidance, selfish comfort, refusal to care. So is doing nothing while harm happens better than causing harm directly? Often yes, because intent and direct causation matter. But not always. Sometimes doing nothing is nearly as bad or even worse if your silence or inaction allows greater harm. The moral weight depends on context: what you knew, what you could do, and why you chose not to act. The safest moral rule might be this: we should avoid causing harm through action or inaction whenever we have the power and understanding to prevent it. Morality is not just about what we do. It is also about what we allow. Imagine living in a community where everyone is completely free. No surveillance, no data collection, no government monitoring. You can speak, move, and communicate without anyone watching. This sounds ideal, but there is a problem. Danger can grow unnoticed. Criminals can hide, threats can spread. Now imagine the opposite. Every move is tracked, every message scanned, every location recorded. Crime might drop, but so does personal freedom. You feel watched, controlled, and distrusted. Most societies fall somewhere between these extremes, constantly negotiating how much privacy to give up for safety. The moral question is, how far can we trade personal freedom to protect collective security before it becomes wrong? Privacy protects individuality, dignity, and autonomy. It gives people space to think, experiment, and grow without fear of judgment. It allows you to make mistakes, change opinions, and build identity. Privacy also protects against abuse of power. When authorities cannot see everything you do, they cannot control every part of your life. History shows that when privacy disappears, oppression often follows. Total surveillance has been used by dictatorships to silence dissent. People begin to self-censor because they fear punishment. Privacy is not about hiding wrongdoing. It is about having space to be human. At the same time, safety is a moral responsibility. If society does nothing to prevent crime, innocent people suffer. Communities need security to function. Laws must be enforced. Threats must be monitored. If privacy becomes absolute, police cannot track criminals, governments cannot prevent attacks, and harmful behavior spreads unchecked. When a child is kidnapped, or when a terrorist plans violence, people expect authorities to intervene. Safety protects lives and stability. Without it, freedom becomes meaningless because fear replaces trust. The conflict arises because privacy and safety both come from moral values. Privacy protects individual rights. Safety protects collective well-being. When these values clash, which should win? The answer depends on the situation. If someone wants to install cameras in every home, just in case, most people see that as too extreme. It violates personal space. But cameras in public streets to reduce crime feel more acceptable. The difference lies in scope and relevance. Public areas are shared, so surveillance there feels more reasonable. Private homes are personal, so surveillance feels invasive. The moral line often lies between what is necessary and what is excessive. Intent also matters. If data is collected to stop violence, some people support it. If data is collected to sell products or silence critics, people feel violated. Trust in the authority collecting the data changes everything. A benevolent system might be allowed more access. A corrupt system should be given almost none. But how do we know which system we have? Power can change over time. A tool created for protection can be used for control later. That is why many people fear giving too much freedom away. Once privacy is lost, it rarely returns. Consider national security. After major attacks, governments often pass laws that allow more surveillance. Many citizens agree because fear is high. They believe safety is worth the cost. But over time, those laws stay in place even after the danger fades. Security becomes the justification for monitoring ordinary people. Privacy erodes slowly. People wake up one day and realize they are being tracked in ways they never imagined. Now think about technology. Smartphones, social media, smart devices, and apps collect information daily. Not forced by law, but accepted through convenience. We trade privacy for ease, location tracking for navigation, personal data for personalized content, microphones for voice assistants. Companies promise safety, but the data can be stolen, leaked, or misused. The danger is not just government surveillance. Private companies hold immense power. They can predict behavior, manipulate choices, and shape society. The moral question grows: who controls security, and who protects privacy? Some argue that if you have nothing to hide, you should not worry, but that idea is flawed. Privacy is not about hiding guilt. It is about controlling access to your life. Everyone has personal thoughts, habits, and relationships they do not want monitored. Even harmless information can be used against you in the wrong hands. Privacy gives fairness. Without it, power becomes one-sided. Surveillance reveals, but it does not protect you from being misunderstood or targeted. On the other hand, complete privacy could allow dangerous people to exploit blind spots. Criminals use encrypted communication to plan crimes. Hackers hide their identity. Conspiracies spread in private groups. Law enforcement argues they need access to certain data to protect the public. They say, without these tools, we cannot catch threats in time. The moral pressure grows. If refusing surveillance means someone gets hurt, is that acceptable? The answer may depend on whether the surveillance is targeted or mass. Targeted surveillance, with warrants and evidence, seems fair. It respects privacy until there is a clear reason to investigate. Mass surveillance, where everyone is monitored just in case, treats all citizens as potential criminals. This mindset weakens trust between people and authority. It shifts the burden of proof. Instead of the state proving guilt, people must prove innocence. That is morally dangerous. There is also the issue of choice. If people freely consent to sharing data for safety, the trade feels more ethical. But can consent be real if people do not fully understand the risks? Most users accept terms without reading. Companies design systems to make opting out difficult. Consent becomes an illusion. Morality requires informed choice, not silent acceptance. Society also faces unequal impact. Surveillance often targets certain groups more than others. Minorities, activists, immigrants, or political opponents may be watched more closely. Safety for some can mean oppression for others. Morality demands fairness. If surveillance helps the powerful and hurts the vulnerable, it cannot be justified as collective security. True security protects everyone, not just the majority. Still, privacy cannot be absolute. If a pandemic spreads, health agencies need data to trace infections. If a violent criminal is on the run, police need tools to track them. In emergencies, privacy may need to bend, but the key is accountability. Who oversees the use of power? Are there limits? Are actions transparent? Can surveillance be reversed when the crisis ends? Without boundaries, temporary measures become permanent. Finding the moral balance means asking key questions. Is the loss of privacy necessary or just convenient? Is the surveillance specific or universal? Is there oversight to prevent abuse? Are people informed and able to challenge it? Does it protect the vulnerable or target them? Does it build trust or fear? Privacy and safety are not enemies. They are both moral goods. The challenge is designing systems where they support each other instead of destroying each other. People want to live in a world where they feel safe without feeling watched. They want freedom without chaos. The moral task is not choosing one over the other, but deciding when, how, and why one should give way. The amount of freedom that can be traded depends on the presence of justice, transparency, and respect. Without those, even small sacrifices become dangerous. With them, even hard compromises can become humane. Imagine a burning building. Inside, there is one human and one dog. You can only save one. Most people would save the human without hesitation. This instinct reflects a common belief. Human life is more valuable than animal life. Society builds laws, moral systems, and religions around the idea that humans are uniquely important. But why? Is this belief rooted in logic, emotion, or tradition? And is it always correct? Or are there situations where an animal's life could matter just as much, or even more? Many people argue that humans are more valuable because of unique abilities. Humans can think abstractly, plan long-term, create art, build governments, invent technology, and reflect on morality itself. Humans have complex language, culture, and self-awareness. These traits seem to separate us from animals. If value comes from intelligence or moral agency, then humans hold a higher place. A human life carries not just experience, but also potential. A child who grows up could change the world. A scientist could cure disease. A teacher could shape thousands of lives. The argument is that a human life contains possibilities that animal life does not. But this view faces challenges. Not all humans have advanced abilities. Babies, people with dementia, or those with severe cognitive disabilities may not speak, plan, or understand morality in the usual sense. Yet we still value their lives deeply. If intelligence were the only basis for value, some animals, like dolphins, elephants, or great apes, might rank above certain humans. Most people reject that. This suggests that human value does not depend on ability alone. Maybe we value human life because of shared identity. We are human, so we protect our own. But that sounds like species loyalty, rather than objective morality. Another common argument is that humans have souls or spiritual worth. Many religious traditions teach that humans have a divine purpose or special status. This belief places humans above animals by design. But this view depends on faith, not universal logic. Not everyone shares the same beliefs about souls or divine hierarchy. In a secular context, saying humans are more valuable just because they are human can sound like prejudice, similar to racism or sexism. Some philosophers call it speciesism, discrimination based on species rather than morally relevant traits. Animal ethics has evolved over time. In the past, animals were seen as property or tools. People hunted, farmed, and experimented on them without concern. Now many recognize that animals feel pain, fear, and joy. They form bonds, grieve, and seek safety. Science continues to show how emotionally complex animals can be. If the ability to suffer matters morally, then animal suffering counts. This is why laws against cruelty exist. We do not value animals equally to humans, but we do value them more than objects. This raises a question. If suffering is morally relevant, does preventing animal suffering matter almost as much as preventing human suffering? But because value depends on character, impact, or relationships, a person who harms others may be seen as less deserving of protection than an animal who helps others. This challenges the idea that all human lives are automatically more valuable than all animal lives in every situation. Context matters. Moral value might not be a fixed hierarchy, but a matrix of relationships, responsibilities, and consequences. Think about emotional bonds. Many people would risk their lives to save their pets. Some say they love their dog more than most humans they meet. If value comes from love and connection, then for that person, the dog's life may genuinely hold more personal worth than a stranger's. Yet society would expect them to save the stranger first. This exposes a conflict between personal morality and social morality. Legally, humans come first. Emotionally, it may not be so clear. Another angle is ecological. One human can consume huge resources, harm the environment, or contribute to extinction. One animal, like a bee or a keystone predator, might support entire ecosystems. If moral value includes the role in sustaining life, some animals contribute more to the balance of nature than many humans. Without bees, humans would starve. Without humans, the planet might recover. This does not mean bees are more valuable than people, but it does challenge human-centered thinking. Still, humans have moral responsibility. We understand right and wrong. We can protect others, build societies, and care for the vulnerable. Animals do not carry moral duties in the same way. This makes human life uniquely moral. A human life is not just biological. It is moral, social, and symbolic. Losing a human means losing a storyteller, a learner, a decision maker. This complexity makes many people say that even flawed humans hold a kind of intrinsic worth that animals do not. But what about extreme cases? If saving one human means causing massive suffering to many animals, is that always moral? Think about factory farming. Billions of animals live in horrific conditions to feed humans. If humans are infinitely more valuable, this might seem acceptable. But most people feel uneasy about this. They recognize that animal suffering matters. Some go vegetarian or vegan because they believe animal lives deserve serious moral weight. They do not equate animals with humans, but they reject the idea that human desire automatically outweighs animal pain. Philosophers like Peter Singer argue that the ability to suffer is morally central. If a being can experience pain or pleasure, its interests matter. Species does not matter. Under this view, a healthy animal with rich emotional life could have greater moral value than a brain-dead human with no awareness. This is deeply uncomfortable for many, but it forces us to examine why we value life. Is it consciousness, rationality, relationships, or just instinctive loyalty? Some think moral value comes from moral potential. A baby cannot reason yet, but one day it will. An animal will never gain moral agency. That potential is valuable. But others argue potential is not the same as actuality. A being that can feel now matters now. We protect babies, not for potential, but because we love them and see them as part of the human community. This suggests value comes from social inclusion rather than raw potential. Cultural views also differ. Some cultures treat animals as sacred, others treat them as resources. Some honor certain animals as family members. Others see them as symbols or tools. Morality is not consistent across societies. The question of value may depend on worldview, but global conversations about animal rights show a shift. People are questioning human superiority and asking whether compassion should extend beyond our species. The hardest moral situations involve trade-offs. If a cure for a human disease requires animal testing, is it justified? If saving endangered animals requires relocating human communities, is that fair? These dilemmas show that value is not a simple ladder with humans on top. It is a network of ethical duties to ourselves, to each other, to animals, and to the planet. So is a human life always more valuable than an animal's? Many will still say yes, because of intelligence, morality, or spiritual belief. But the more we learn about animals and the more we question our assumptions, the harder it becomes to give an absolute answer. In some contexts, human life carries unique moral weight. In others, the lines blur. Value may not be fixed by species alone, but shaped by capacity, connection, responsibility, and context. The real moral challenge is to recognize the worth of human life without denying the worth of other lives. Imagine a person at age 18 who commits a serious crime. 10 or 20 years later, that same person has completely changed. They have different beliefs, habits, values, and behavior. They feel deep remorse. They would never repeat the act. They may even help others avoid the same mistakes. The question arises, are they still the same person who committed the crime? If identity changes over time, should they remain responsible for actions done by a past version of themselves? This dilemma mirrors the ship of Theseus. If every plank of a ship is replaced over time, is it still the same ship? When applied to personal identity, the question becomes not just philosophical, but moral and legal. At first, the law treats identity as simple. If your body and legal name are the same, you are the same person. You remain responsible for past actions, regardless of inner change. This view maintains social order. If people could escape accountability by claiming they changed, justice would collapse. Victims would suffer without closure. Society needs a consistent definition of identity for responsibility. But law is about structure. Morality goes deeper. It asks, does fairness require punishment if the person who exists now is fundamentally different from the one who caused harm? We all change over time. Childhood, trauma, learning, and growth shape us. The angry teenager may become a calm adult. The selfish person may become compassionate. The cruel may become kind. Some people change due to therapy, religious awakening, or life experiences. In extreme cases, neurological changes or injury can alter personality completely. When change is gradual, society still sees the person as continuous. But change raises a troubling point. If character determines moral responsibility, what happens when character transforms? Some believe responsibility must stay no matter what. The argument is that actions have consequences. Even if you regret and change, you still did the harm. The moral weight of that harm does not disappear. Growth does not cancel past accountability. Apology and transformation may reduce blame, but responsibility remains. If a person breaks a window and later becomes generous, the window is still broken. Someone must repair it. Responsibility is tied to causation, not current identity. But others argue that identity is not defined by a static body, but by the mind and values. If someone is unrecognizable in thought and behavior, punishing them is like punishing a stranger. Imagine a person who committed crimes while addicted or brainwashed, then fully recovered. The former self felt no empathy. The new self feels deep compassion. Are they one person or two psychological selves across time? If morality judges intent and character, then holding the reformed self to account for the old self seems unjust. It treats the person as a permanent entity rather than a developing being. Consider memory. Memory connects past and present. If someone cannot remember the act due to illness, injury, or trauma, do they still deserve blame? Many argue yes, because the body is the same. But if memory is part of identity and memory is gone, the link to the act becomes weaker. In some legal systems, people with advanced dementia are not punished, even if they committed crimes earlier, because they no longer understand or control their actions. This implies identity includes mental continuity, not just biological existence. Still, complete moral exemption feels risky. People could claim change to avoid consequences. Many offenders fake remorse. True change is difficult to measure. If society allowed people to escape responsibility by claiming they have changed, justice could be manipulated. So even if philosophically identity changes, practically we hold people responsible to protect fairness and deterrence. Responsibility also sends a message that actions matter, regardless of later transformation. But punishment has purposes: retribution, deterrence, rehabilitation, and protection. If someone has already rehabilitated, is punishment still needed? Retribution focuses on the past. The person deserves to suffer for wrongdoing. If the person now is morally different, does retribution make sense? Deterrence protects society by warning others, but deterrence can exist without punishing the reformed. Rehabilitation aims to change character, but if change already occurred, punishment becomes unnecessary. Protection ensures dangerous people cannot harm others, but if the person is no longer dangerous, protection through punishment is redundant. This analysis suggests punishment of a fully transformed person mainly serves revenge or symbolic fairness, not practical good. Yet punishment is also about the victim. Victims seek closure, acknowledgement, and justice. If the offender changes but never faces consequences, victims may feel ignored. Forgiveness may be possible, but it cannot be forced. Even if the offender is different now, the victim still suffered. Accountability honors the victim's experience. This is why some argue that personal change does not erase responsibility. You can grow and still owe something to those you hurt. There is also a middle approach. Someone can remain responsible, but also be recognized for change. The law already does this through reduced sentences, parole, or restorative justice. In restorative justice, the offender faces the victim, apologizes, makes amends, and shows genuine transformation. This approach sees people as capable of change, while still holding them accountable. It respects both the past and the present self. But what about extreme psychological change, like a brain injury that wipes out personality? If identity relies on memory, character, and intention, sometimes the new self truly is not the same moral agent. Imagine a violent criminal suffers brain damage that turns them gentle and innocent. Punishing them feels morally wrong. This case suggests that responsibility might depend on psychological continuity rather than physical continuity alone. The ship of Theseus teaches that identity over time is complicated. If every belief, desire, habit, and behavior changes, is this still the same person morally? One view says yes, because identity is a continuous chain. Even if each plank is replaced, the process connects them. The past self led to the present. Growth does not erase origin. Another view says no, because moral identity is not just a timeline, but a pattern. If the pattern is entirely different, the person is new. Maybe the truth lies in recognizing that identity is layered. On a legal level, we are the same person across time. On a biological level, most cells in our body are replaced over years, yet we remain one organism. On a psychological level, we are multiple versions of ourselves throughout life. Childhood, adolescence, adulthood. Each stage carries different traits. We look back and say, I was a different person then. Yet we also say, that was still me. We carry responsibility because identity is not all or nothing. It is gradual and complex. Responsibility might depend on how much continuity exists. If someone has changed morally, but still remembers, regrets, and understands their past actions, they remain the same person enough to be responsible. Growth deepens responsibility because understanding increases guilt. But if psychological continuity breaks entirely, no memory, no traits, no values, we hesitate to assign blame. In everyday life, most people do not change completely. They grow, but some core identity remains. That core ties them to past actions. The real challenge is deciding when change crosses the line. Identity is a ship rebuilt piece by piece, but we do not know when it stops being the same. Morality must balance justice for past harm with recognition of transformation. Whether someone is responsible depends on what we believe identity truly is, an unbroken chain of existence, or a living idea that evolves and sometimes becomes something new. Imagine someone who says, I don't want to know, right before doing something that might cause harm. They sense there could be negative consequences, but instead of checking, they look away. They avoid information on purpose, so they do not feel guilty. This is intentional ignorance. It is not the same as not knowing. It is choosing not to know. The moral question is whether avoiding knowledge makes someone less responsible or more responsible. Can you claim innocence if you deliberately close your eyes? Our instincts often treat ignorance as an excuse. If you truly did not know something would cause harm, you seem less guilty. Intent shows moral weight. Accident and intent are not the same. If you step on someone's foot without seeing them, it is different from stomping on purpose. But intentional ignorance changes this. It is not passive, it is active avoidance of truth. It is choosing comfort over responsibility. That choice suggests awareness that something might be wrong. It is a way of protecting oneself from moral accountability, rather than protecting others from harm. Consider a factory manager who never checks how their products are made. Deep down, they suspect workers may be exploited. They avoid asking questions. They do not read reports. They keep things vague so they can claim, I didn't know. This looks like self-protection, not innocence. They benefit from not knowing because knowing would force them to make ethical changes that cost money. In this case, ignorance itself becomes part of the wrongdoing. It allows injustice to continue. The manager may not personally harm anyone, but their refusal to know keeps them complicit. Now think about consumer choices. People buy cheap clothes or electronics. They may suspect that these products come from sweatshops or harmful mining, but they avoid researching it. They prefer not to see the pain behind the price. This type of intentional ignorance is common. People feel that if they do not know for sure, they are free from guilt. But does avoiding knowledge remove moral responsibility? Some would argue that choosing not to know when it is easy to find out still makes you responsible. You benefit from the harm. You could have known, but you did not want to. That avoidance is itself a moral choice. Yet not all ignorance is equal. Some situations are overwhelming. There are endless problems: environmental damage, animal cruelty, unfair labor, corruption. People cannot investigate everything. Mental health and capacity matter. If trying to know everything leads to paralysis or despair, is it fair to say ignorance is immoral? Morality must allow for realistic limits. People have jobs, families, and personal struggles. They cannot be full-time investigators. So the moral issue is not whether someone knows everything, but whether they avoid knowing when they have good reason to look deeper. The key difference is intention. There is accidental ignorance, where someone genuinely lacks access to information or has no reason to suspect harm. Then there is willful ignorance, where someone senses a problem and avoids clarity. For example, someone dating a person with suspicious behavior may ignore the signs of manipulation because facing them would mean ending the relationship. Emotion stops them from seeing the truth. This ignorance causes harm, but may not come from malice. It comes from fear. Should that be judged as immoral, or should it be seen as human weakness? Morality must recognize emotional complexity. There are also systems that encourage ignorance. Companies hide environmental damage. Politicians bury data. Advertisers distract consumers. Society often makes truth hard to find. In such cases, responsibility may lie partly with the institutions, but individuals still have agency. If something seems too good to be true, morality might require deeper curiosity. Pretending everything is fine when there are signs of harm is morally questionable. Sometimes people choose ignorance for plausible deniability. They think, if I don't know, I can't be blamed. But moral responsibility is not only about knowledge, it is also about effort. If someone makes no effort to learn the consequences of their actions, they bear responsibility for the harm those actions cause. The law even recognizes this with the concept of reckless disregard. If you should have known, but chose not to know, you can still be guilty. Morality works the same way. Responsibility increases when people ignore clear signs or easy opportunities to learn the truth. However, there are rare times when not knowing might seem justified. If learning about something will traumatize you or paralyze you, is avoiding knowledge self-preservation rather than immorality? For example, someone with anxiety might avoid the news to protect mental health. This is not selfishness, it is survival. Moral judgment should consider the reason behind the ignorance. Avoiding truth to protect others is different from avoiding truth to protect comfort or profit. There is also the question of scale. If your actions affect no one, ignorance may not matter. But if your choices influence others, employees, customers, animals, the environment, then avoiding knowledge can become a form of passive harm. People with power or influence have greater duty to know. A leader who avoids knowing how their decisions hurt people is more morally at fault than someone with little power who avoids overwhelming information. Relationships reveal another layer. If a friend makes harmful choices and you ignore it, knowing you could intervene, that is a type of omission. Moral duty in relationships includes honesty and care. Avoiding the truth about someone close to you can enable their harm to themselves or others. In this sense, intentional ignorance can be betrayal. But what about situations where knowing creates burdens you cannot handle? Moral life is full of trade-offs. You cannot stop every harm you become aware of. Sometimes you learn something painful, but are powerless to change it. People avoid knowledge because they fear guilt without ability. The fear is real, but does inability remove responsibility? Perhaps morality here is not about fixing everything, but about acknowledging reality and doing what you can. Ignorance may protect comfort, but truth allows growth and ethical choice, even if small. Intentional ignorance often reflects a deeper question. Do we have a duty to face uncomfortable truths? Many would say yes, not because we must solve everything, but because looking away allows harm to grow. Change starts with awareness. Awareness leads to empathy. Empathy leads to action. Ignorance blocks that entire path. There is also a link between ignorance and identity. People avoid knowing the consequences of their actions because it threatens their self-image. If you see yourself as a good person, learning that your choices hurt others creates cognitive dissonance. Rather than change behavior, people change what they allow themselves to see. They protect their identity at the expense of honesty. True morality might require the opposite, being brave enough to see and accept the truth, even when it hurts your self-image. So is intentional ignorance immoral? In many cases, yes, not because ignorance itself is evil, but because avoiding truth is a way of hiding from responsibility. When you suspect harm and choose not to look, you choose your own comfort over others' well-being. That is a moral decision. Ignorance can be an excuse, but when it is chosen, it becomes its own kind of wrongdoing. Yet morality also demands understanding. Not everyone who avoids truth is selfish. Some are scared, overwhelmed, or conditioned by culture. Moral growth requires compassion and education, not just blame. The most moral path may not be perfect knowledge, but honest effort. The line between moral and immoral ignorance lies in whether you avoid truth to protect yourself or face it to protect others. Imagine two people asking for help. One has worked hard, treated others well, and fallen on hard times through no fault of their own. The other has made bad choices, hurt people, or wasted opportunities, and now faces the same level of suffering. Who should receive help first? Many people instinctively want to help the good person, the one who seems deserving, but others argue that help should go to whoever suffers most, regardless of their past. This conflict reveals a deep moral tension between fairness and compassion, justice and mercy, judgment and care. The idea of helping the deserving comes from a sense of fairness. People believe rewards or aid should match effort and responsibility. If someone works hard and still struggles, they seem worthy of support. If someone lives recklessly and then suffers, many feel less obligated to help. This belief appears in everyday life. People are more willing to donate to respectful and polite individuals than to those who appear rude or irresponsible. We like to feel that our help contributes to someone who will use it well. There is also fear that helping undeserving people enables their behavior or encourages laziness. On the other hand, need-based helping focuses on suffering itself. Pain is pain, regardless of its cause. If someone is hungry, injured, or in danger, the moral impulse to relieve that suffering does not depend on their goodness. In medicine, doctors treat all patients, even criminals. In emergencies, rescuers do not ask for moral resumes. A person drowning is saved whether they are a saint or a thief. This view emphasizes compassion over judgment. It sees help as a human right, tied to vulnerability, not virtue. Both sides claim moral weight. Prioritizing the deserving supports responsibility, fairness, and social order. Prioritizing the needy supports empathy, dignity, and unconditional care. The question becomes, which value should guide us when resources are limited or when choices must be made? To explore this, imagine a disaster with limited supplies. A kind teacher and a violent criminal both beg for water. The teacher seems more deserving, but the criminal might be dehydrated and closer to death. Do we save the better person or the one in greater need? Many would choose the teacher, but if we choose based on moral worth, we risk turning help into a reward system. Help then becomes conditional, as if compassion must be earned. However, people worry that helping without judgment removes accountability. If someone keeps making self-destructive choices and always receives aid, does that encourage more harm? Some argue that fairness requires consequences. Yet consequences already exist in suffering. People who make bad choices often face poverty, illness, and isolation. Withholding help adds more pain to someone already struggling. Is that justice or vengeance? This tension appears in debates about welfare, healthcare, homelessness, and addiction. Some people say, we should help only those who try to help themselves. Others say, people cannot always help themselves without support. Addiction is a clear example. Some blame the addict and refuse help. Others see addiction as illness and give care. Which view is moral? It depends on how we see human behavior, as fully chosen or shaped by circumstances like trauma, poverty, and mental health. When someone says they don't deserve help, they often assume full control over life outcomes. But many people suffer because of things beyond their control: where they were born, what family they had, what opportunities they received. Even bad choices often grow from pain, fear, or survival. If we only help the perfectly innocent, almost no one qualifies. Moral purity is rare. Everyone makes mistakes. If help requires perfection, help becomes impossible. But is it fair to ignore character completely? What if two people suffer equally, but one has harmed others? Should we treat them the same? Some think character matters because helping someone who has caused harm without addressing that harm can be unjust to victims. This is where moral complexity deepens. Help and accountability do not have to be opposites. You can help someone while still holding them responsible. For example, rehabilitation programs support criminals while expecting change. This balances need and responsibility. Another angle is effectiveness. Helping the deserving may produce better results because they are more likely to use the help wisely. But need-based help may prevent the most intense suffering, which has its own moral value. Sometimes those who suffer most are least able to help themselves. If we wait until they become deserving, they may never survive long enough to change. There is also the problem of who decides deserving. Bias can influence judgment. People may label someone undeserving because of appearance, race, class, or stereotypes. Systems built on deservingness often reflect prejudice rather than justice. History shows that entire groups were seen as less worthy of help. Need-based approaches protect against this by focusing on suffering, not identity. Consider a parent. If they have two children, one kind and one difficult, and both are in pain, does the parent help only the kinder child? No. Love responds to need, not merit. Many argue society should act with the same unconditional care. However, a parent may also discipline the difficult child to guide them. This suggests an answer: help the needy, but also encourage growth and responsibility. Another question: Does someone bad stop deserving help? Imagine a person who has done terrible things but now regrets them and wants to change. If no one helps them, change becomes impossible. Even people who cause harm can become better with support. Refusing to help them traps them in their past. Prioritizing only the good can freeze people in their worst moment and remove hope for transformation. Yet helping must be wise, not naive. Blind help can create dependency or allow harm to continue. Moral helping considers both heart and judgment. It asks what kind of help reduces suffering and increases long-term well-being. Sometimes that means giving freely. Sometimes that means offering structured support with guidance or accountability. Compassion and wisdom must work together. In many cases, the conflict between deserving and needing is false. Often, people who suffer most are not undeserving. They are unlucky. They face violence, illness, poverty, or discrimination. They may look irresponsible, but their options were limited. When we learn their stories, deservingness becomes more complicated. Moral humility tells us to avoid quick judgment. A deeper layer of this debate asks, what is the purpose of help? Is it to reward virtue or to reduce pain? If help is a reward, we give it to the good. If help is about care, we give it to the suffering. Society sometimes confuses the two. Prizes reward goodness, aid relieves suffering. Mixing them creates injustice. Compassion does not require moral approval. Still, we also value fairness. People want to see effort, honesty, and gratitude. Helping those who constantly take advantage without trying can feel like betrayal to others who work hard. That emotional response is valid. It pushes us to find a balance. Respect effort, but not at the expense of the suffering. One possible moral approach is this: help based on need, but never ignore responsibility. Care for the suffering, even if they caused some of their pain, but also encourage and guide toward better choices. Do not deny help because someone is flawed. We all are. Do not excuse harm because someone is suffering. Harm still matters. Morality is not about choosing between justice and compassion. It is about holding both. Imagine someone desperate for money. They cannot pay rent, feed their family, or escape debt. You offer them a job, but the pay is extremely low and the work is dangerous. They accept because they have no other option. Legally, this is a voluntary agreement, but morally, is it fair? This is the exploitation paradox. Can something be wrong if both sides agree? Does consent make a bad deal acceptable? Or can an offer itself be immoral when one person holds all the power? Many people believe that as long as a deal is voluntary, it is fair. Freedom of choice is a core moral value. If adults make a decision, even a bad one, we should respect their autonomy. Interfering might seem paternalistic or controlling. In markets and contracts, consent is the main ethical line. If both sides agree and no one is forced, the deal is valid. From this point of view, offering a bad deal is not immoral. It might be greedy or cold, but as long as the person accepts it freely, it is not exploitation. But what does freely mean when someone is desperate? If the only other choice is starvation or homelessness, is the acceptance truly free? Desperation can limit autonomy as much as physical force. Coercion is not only about threats, it can also be about circumstances. If someone accepts a bad deal because the alternative is unbearable, then their consent is not the product of genuine freedom, it is survival. In such cases, the person offering the deal uses the other's vulnerability to their advantage. This looks less like a fair exchange and more like manipulation. Consider sweatshops. Workers agree to long hours and unsafe conditions for very low wages. They accept because there are no better options. The factory owner can say, they chose to work here. But the workers might say, we had no choice. Who is right? If the owner knows the workers are trapped and still offers the lowest possible wage, is that morally acceptable? The workers do get something from the deal, income, but the owner gets much more. The fairness of the transaction depends on power dynamics, not just consent. Some argue that offering a bad deal is better than offering nothing. If the worker accepts, it means they are better off than before. So, the offer adds value to their life. This view treats deals as mutually beneficial, even if one side benefits more. However, morality is not just about increasing benefit. It also concerns dignity and justice. If someone gains from another's desperation instead of helping improve their condition, is that moral progress or exploitation disguised as opportunity? The concept of exploitation involves taking unfair advantage, not just any advantage. If someone is skilled and I pay them poorly because they don't know their worth, that may be exploitative even if they agree. If someone is in crisis and I give them terms far worse than I would give others, I am using their weakness. Morality may require us to consider what a fair deal would look like if both parties had equal power or knowledge. Offering much less than that suggests exploitation. Intent also matters. If I offer a low deal because I truly cannot afford more, that is different from offering low pay when I could easily do better. The first might be unfortunate necessity. The second is greed. Exploitation lies not in the inequality alone, but in the choice to profit from inequality. If I know the other person is vulnerable and I design the deal to maximize my gain at their expense, my intention is self-serving at best, predatory at worst. But what if the person offering the bad deal is also struggling? Imagine a small business owner barely surviving who hires someone at low wages. Both need the money. Neither is powerful. Is this exploitation? Probably not. Exploitation usually involves a significant imbalance of power. When both parties have limited options, the deal may be unfair, but neither is clearly exploiting the other. The morality depends on whether the stronger party is intentionally using the weakness of the other. There is also a difference between a bad deal and a harmful deal. A bad deal might simply be unequal. A harmful deal damages the weaker party physically, mentally, or economically in the long term. For example, high-interest payday loans trap people in debt. Borrowers agree, but lenders design the system so borrowers almost always lose. This is not mutual benefit. It is structured harm. Even with consent, such practices feel immoral because they prey on vulnerability rather than empower the person in need. Some people argue that individuals must take responsibility for their choices. If someone accepts a bad deal, it is their fault for not refusing or finding something better. But this ignores systemic issues. Not everyone has access to education, opportunity, or safety. Many choices exist only in theory. Blaming individuals protects unjust systems. Morality should look at the conditions that shape choices, not just the choices themselves. At the same time, we must be cautious. If we forbid all bad deals, we might take away the few opportunities people have. Banning low-wage jobs could leave people with no income at all. That is why some argue that the solution is not to ban deals, but to improve the conditions under which deals are made. Regulation, minimum wage, worker protections, and social safety nets create a floor for fairness. This reduces the need for desperate choices. In this view, offering a bad deal in a broken system may be immoral. But the deeper immorality lies in maintaining a system where bad deals are the only option. Exploitation also becomes clearer when we flip the situation. What if a wealthy person needed something urgently, and a poor person charged an extreme price? Imagine a billionaire, stranded and in danger, and a poor villager says, "I will save you, but only if you give me your mansion." Most people would call that unfair or extortion. Yet, when the roles reverse, when the powerful demands everything from the vulnerable, we often call it business. This double standard reveals that our moral instincts do recognize exploitation, but we excuse it when it benefits those already in power. Perhaps the core moral question is, are you helping someone or using them? Offering any deal that improves someone's situation is not automatically moral. What matters is whether the deal respects their dignity, supports their well-being, and avoids trapping them. If you offer a deal knowing they will suffer while you gain, then consent is not enough to call it moral. The exploitation paradox teaches that voluntariness alone does not guarantee morality. Consent can exist alongside coercion when circumstances force acceptance. A deal can be legal but still unethical. A moral deal lifts both parties, not just one. It recognizes need without weaponizing it. It balances benefit with fairness. It sees the person, not just the opportunity. Imagine someone who never harms anyone but sometimes has dark thoughts. Maybe they wish revenge when someone insults them. Maybe they fantasize about doing something cruel in anger. They never act on these thoughts. They control themselves and behave well. The question is, are they still immoral for what they wanted in their mind? Is it wrong to desire evil even when no harm is done? This question challenges how we think about morality. Does it belong to actions only, or also to the inner world? On the surface, it makes sense to judge people by behavior. After all, thoughts cannot hurt others. If someone feels anger but chooses restraint, isn't that self-control something to admire? In law, only actions matter. You cannot be punished for fantasies or emotions. Governments cannot read minds. Judging someone for thoughts would be dangerous because it could punish innocent imagination, fears, or intrusive mental patterns. Many people have unwanted thoughts they never intend to act on. Condemning thoughts might lead to guilt and shame rather than moral growth. However, morality is not only about law. Morality also involves character. Who you are inside shapes who you might become. If someone constantly wants to harm others, even if they never act on it, does that reveal a corrupt heart? Some religious traditions say yes. In certain teachings, even wanting to commit adultery or murder is sinful because it reflects inner moral failure. This view argues that evil intentions are the first step toward evil actions, so stopping them early matters. If you celebrate cruelty in your imagination, you cultivate a mindset that could lead to real harm. But people do not choose every thought that appears in their mind. Thoughts can be automatic reactions. You might feel anger and imagine hurting someone in the heat of the moment. But then your conscience stops you. Is the mere appearance of the thought immoral, or does morality depend on how you respond to it? A fleeting impulse is different from a cherished fantasy. The first is part of being human. The second may reveal deeper desire. Consider this example. Two people are insulted. One imagines hitting the insulter, but lets it go and walks away. The other smiles on the outside, but secretly spends hours dreaming of humiliating or injuring the insulter, enjoying the fantasy. Both avoid action. Are they morally equal? Most would say no. The second person seems more malicious because they nurture the desire for harm. Their restraint may come from fear, not virtue. The first person felt anger but rejected it. The second fed it. This suggests that morality involves not just outer behavior, but inner intention. Still, judging thoughts is complicated. People have different levels of control over their minds. Trauma, mental illness, or intrusive thoughts can cause unwanted mental images that do not reflect moral desire. Someone with obsessive-compulsive disorder may have violent thoughts they hate. They feel horrified by them. Punishing them morally would be unfair because their thoughts do not reflect their will. They are victims of their own mind, not immoral actors. Morality should look at intention, not random mental noise. Let's examine desire itself. What if someone truly enjoys imagining evil acts? They feel pleasure in cruelty. They never act because they are afraid of consequences, not because they believe it is wrong. Morally, this kind of person might worry us. Their inner world suggests that if laws or risks disappeared, they might act on these desires. Morality is about what kind of person you are, not only what you do. If someone avoids harm only out of fear, not conscience, is that moral restraint or strategic self-interest? But what if someone has harmful desires and actively resists them because they believe in doing right? In that case, their inner struggle shows moral strength. The desire might not define them, their response to the desire does. A good person is not someone who never feels anger, jealousy, or hatred. A good person notices those feelings and rejects them. Their character is proven in the battle against the darker parts of human nature. So when does a thought become morally wrong? Perhaps the key is consent. Thoughts appear, but we can choose whether to accept them, feed them, or dismiss them. If a harmful fantasy pops into your mind and you push it away, you are not immoral, you are responsible. If a harmful fantasy appears and you enjoy it, repeat it, and protect it, you may be cultivating immorality in your heart. Morality lives not in the moment the thought appears, but in what you do with it. There is also the question of empathy. Someone who constantly indulges in fantasies of hurting others might lose empathy over time. Rehearsing cruelty can numb compassion. Imagination shapes character. Even without action, thought patterns can erode virtue. This is one reason why people debate the effects of violent media. Does imagining violence make you more likely to commit it? Not always. Many people consume fictional violence without losing empathy. The difference lies in motive. Are you exploring a story or celebrating harm? Are you trying to understand darkness or feeding it? Let's also consider intentions without action in another direction. If wanting to do evil is immoral, is wanting to do good moral, even if you never act? Most people would say yes, pure intentions matter. But what if someone constantly thinks about helping others but never actually helps? Are they still moral? Good thoughts with no action may feel noble, but without action, they change nothing. This shows a double standard. We excuse evil thoughts if they are never acted on, yet we praise good thoughts even if they lead nowhere. Morality may require consistency. Both good and bad thoughts matter most when they shape choices. Even so, action has the greatest weight. A person who never harms anyone but has dark thoughts is better for the world than someone who thinks kind thoughts but causes damage. Society is shaped by behavior. Thoughts become moral concerns, namely when they influence character, and future choices. What about premeditation? The law punishes planned crime more harshly than impulsive crime. Why? Because premeditation reveals intent. If someone thinks seriously about doing harm, even if they fail or change their mind, that thought process indicates a will to harm. Yet if someone fantasizes impulsively in anger and moves on, the intent was shallow. The depth and seriousness of the desire changes how we judge it. Ultimately, moral judgment of thoughts requires nuance. Some thoughts reflect raw emotion. Some reflect deliberate desire. Some reflect mental illness. Some reflect temptation. Some reflect suppressed rage. Not all thoughts are equal. What matters is ownership. Do you identify with the thought or resist it? Do you nurture it or fight it? Do you see it as wrong or justify it? So, is it wrong to want to do evil if you never act on it? If the desire is real, embraced, and unchecked, it may still be immoral, because morality includes the heart. But if the desire is unwanted and resisted, the struggle itself is moral. Goodness is not the absence of darkness. It is the choice to reject it, even when it whispers in your mind. Imagine a parent with two children. One is healthy and independent. The other has a disability and needs extra care. If the parent gives both children the exact same amount of time, attention, and resources, is that fair? On paper, it looks equal, but the child with greater needs may end up worse off. This example reveals a tension at the heart of morality and justice. Equality means treating everyone the same, while fairness might mean treating people differently based on their needs. The question is whether strict equality is truly fair when people start from different positions or face different challenges. Most people value equality because it protects against favoritism and discrimination. When every person gets the same rules, the same opportunities, and the same respect, it feels just. Equality keeps systems neutral and prevents abuse of power. If someone receives more attention, more money, or more rights than others, it raises suspicion. Strict equality feels safe because it is clear and measurable. It avoids judgment calls about who deserves more. In many contexts, like voting rights, legal protection, or freedom of speech, equality is the foundation of fairness. However, strict equality can become blind to real differences. Imagine a teacher giving every student the same test support. Even if some students have learning disabilities or lack basic resources, the opportunity may look equal, but the outcome will not be. People do not begin at the same starting point. They have different backgrounds, abilities, and obstacles. Treating people the same when their situations are unequal can reinforce injustice. In this sense, equality can actually produce inequality. Fairness, on the other hand, often means proportional support, giving people what they need to reach similar outcomes. This is called equity. Equity recognizes that treating everyone identically is not always just. Giving extra help to the disadvantaged can balance the playing field. A wheelchair ramp gives one person more resources than the others, but it creates equal access. Free school lunches give some students more than others, but it ensures no child goes hungry. Equity values dignity and opportunity over uniform distribution. Still, equity raises hard questions. Who decides people's needs? How much extra help is fair? If we give more to some, do we take away from others? People worry that equity punishes those who work hard. If someone puts in effort and gets the same as someone who does not, they may see equality as unfair. But if someone is struggling because of circumstances beyond their control, strict equality can feel cruel. The difficulty lies in separating need from effort, disadvantage from irresponsibility. Life is messy, and blanket rules rarely capture moral complexity. Consider healthcare. Strict equality would mean everyone gets the same number of doctor visits or the same treatment. But a person with chronic illness needs more care than someone who is generally healthy. If we follow equality, the sick person suffers. If we follow fairness, the sick person receives more. Society tends to accept the fairness approach here. Most people agree that medical care should be based on need, not strict equality. Yet in other areas, people resist when resources are distributed unevenly. The difference often lies in how visible or sympathetic the need is. Imagine a workplace where two employees are paid the same salary. One works twice as hard. Strict equality says equal pay is fair, but most people feel the harder worker deserves more. Now consider the opposite. Two people work the same job, but one must travel 2 hours each day while the other lives nearby. Should they receive the same pay? Some say yes, same job, same pay. Others say no, the person with more burden deserves compensation. What counts as need and what counts as choice depends on perspective. Children understand the difference early. If a parent gives both kids the same number of toys, that is equal. But if one child has outgrown their toys and the other has none, equal distribution might feel unfair. Children complain, "That's not fair," when they do not consider context. Adults often do the same. People naturally compare what they receive to others, not whether what they receive fits their true needs or responsibilities. Strict equality also struggles when resources are limited. If there is not enough for everyone to have the same, should we divide it evenly or prioritize the most urgent cases? In emergencies, we often choose fairness over equality. Doctors treat the most injured first, not in order of arrival. Disaster relief goes to the hardest hit areas before the mildly affected ones. In crisis, we instinctively value need over equal share. But when the situation is not urgent, people return to demanding equal treatment. Another issue is merit. Should fairness reward talent and effort? Many believe people who contribute more should receive more. This idea supports motivation and innovation, but merit itself is influenced by need. Someone born in privilege may excel more easily than someone born in hardship. If we ignore starting positions, meritocracy can become another form of inequality. A person who overcomes great obstacles to achieve modest success might deserve more recognition than someone who succeeds effortlessly. Fairness must account for both merit and context. Cultural views shape how people balance equality and fairness. Some cultures value collectivism and support dividing resources based on need. Others value individualism and support dividing resources based on effort or achievement. Neither view is inherently immoral. The conflict arises when equality and fairness collide. Helping the needy can feel unfair to the successful. Rewarding the successful can feel unfair to the struggling. Even morally, equality and fairness share the same goal: justice. The question is not which to choose, but when to use each. Equality works best when protecting rights, dignity, and basic treatment. Everyone deserves equal respect, equal legal protection, equal freedom. Fairness works best when distributing resources or opportunities in ways that acknowledge real differences. Equality ensures no one is above others. Fairness ensures no one is left behind. Imagine a classroom. Equality means each student gets the same textbook. Fairness means some students get tutors, extra time, or assistive tools. Both aim to help each student learn. The teacher must balance both: equal respect, tailored support. Society faces the same challenge on a larger scale. People fear that fairness might become favoritism and equality might become indifference. The moral challenge is to prevent both extremes. Strict equality without context can be cold. Pure fairness without limits can be chaotic. Real justice blends them. Equal value of each person. Fair response to each person's situation. Equality asks, are we treating everyone the same? Fairness asks, are we giving everyone what they truly need? Sometimes these answers match. Often they do not. When they conflict, morality requires more than formulas. It requires empathy, wisdom, and courage to see that fairness may demand unequal treatment to achieve a deeper kind of equality. Equality of opportunity, equality of dignity, equality of possibility. Imagine a person who wants to smoke, drink heavily, refuse medical treatment, gamble, free climb cliffs, or spend all their money on dangerous hobbies. These choices might damage their body, health, finances, or future. Should they still be free to make them? Some say yes. Freedom includes the right to make mistakes, even painful ones. Others say no. Society has a duty to protect people, even from themselves. This question exposes a deep conflict between personal freedom and protection from harm. Freedom matters because it defines individuality and dignity. Adults are not children. They have the right to decide what to value, what risks to take, and how to live. Without freedom, life becomes controlled and mechanical. People learn, grow, and develop judgment by making choices, including bad ones. A world where no one is allowed to choose harm might also be a world where no one can choose passion, challenge, or independence. Many great achievements were risky or painful. True freedom means control over your own body, mind, time, and future, even if others disagree with your decisions. But harm is real. Some choices destroy lives. Addiction, self-harm, starvation diets, extreme sports without caution. These actions can lead to death or disability. When someone harms themselves, it affects more than just them. Family suffers, friends worry. Society pays for medical care and social support. A person's freedom can create burdens for others. If someone refuses treatment for a contagious disease, their choice can harm the public. Even private harm can ripple outward. This is why many believe society should limit harmful choices, at least in extreme cases. The key question is, where is the line? What counts as a harmful choice we should allow, and what counts as a harmful choice we must prevent? Some cases seem obvious. A suicidal person may be stopped and helped against their will, because the harm is permanent and often driven by mental illness. Society intervenes in cases of self-harm because the person might not be thinking clearly. But what about less extreme choices? If someone wants to eat unhealthy food every day, is it the government's role to stop them? If someone refuses to wear a seatbelt, should the state force them? If someone spends all their savings on lottery tickets, should we ban it? Some argue that the difference lies in competence. A free adult of sound mind should control their own life. But if someone is impaired by drugs, illness, or cognitive limitations, protection is justified. Children are not free to make dangerous choices because they lack maturity. The same logic extends to certain adults. However, deciding who is competent is tricky. A person might be fully aware of the risks and still choose harm. Does competence mean always choosing wisely? If so, then freedom exists only for the responsible, and that is not real freedom. Another argument focuses on the harm principle. The philosopher John Stuart Mill said people should be free to do anything as long as they do not harm others. If self-harm affects only you, society should stay out. This principle has shaped many modern freedoms, but in practice, self-harm almost always affects others indirectly. Health systems, families, workplaces, and communities all feel the impact. Does that mean all harmful choices can be restricted? If so, almost any risky activity could be banned. Yet risk is part of life. Driving a car is risky. Playing sports is risky. Having children is risky. We accept these risks because they have value. Value is the next issue. Some harmful choices also express personal meaning. A person might climb mountains because the danger makes them feel alive. A boxer risks brain injury for glory. Soldiers risk death for duty. Artists starve for passion. Society often celebrates people who risk harm for something meaningful. But who decides what is meaningful? If someone finds meaning in something others see as destructive, does that make it less valid? The challenge is that harmful choices are not always irrational. Sometimes they reflect deep personal values. Forcing people to live safely can strip life of richness. Still, not all harmful choices come from meaning. Some come from trauma, addiction, peer pressure, or lack of options. Is a person in deep pain really choosing freely? If someone drinks because they cannot cope with life, is their freedom genuine or broken? In such cases, intervention may be moral, not to punish, but to help. The goal is not control, but restoration of freedom by healing what takes freedom away from within. Society often uses soft limits rather than total bans. Instead of outlawing cigarettes, governments tax them and add warning labels. Instead of banning unhealthy food, they require nutrition facts. Instead of forbidding risky jobs, they enforce safety rules. These measures try to balance freedom with protection. They guide without fully restricting. This approach respects choice while reducing avoidable harm. But even soft measures raise concerns. Too many warnings can become manipulation. Too many regulations can become paternalism, treating adults like children. Some people resent the idea that the government knows better than individuals. Yet others argue that corporations exploit human weakness, designing addictive products that bypass rational choice. Is it really freedom when billion-dollar industries profit from your self-destruction? Maybe some limits protect freedom from exploitation. Culture affects this debate. Some cultures value personal freedom above all. Others value community welfare more. In individualistic societies, freedom to self-harm is seen as personal business. In collectivist societies, the group has more authority to intervene. Neither view is perfect. Too much freedom ignores vulnerability. Too much protection kills autonomy. The moral challenge is finding balance. We also need to consider fairness. If someone makes harmful choices and then needs public support, should others pay the price? One view says yes, compassion should not depend on behavior. Another view says no, responsibility matters. This issue appears in debates about healthcare and welfare. Do smokers deserve the same care as non-smokers? Do people who ignore safety rules deserve rescue at public expense? Some policies penalize harmful choices, others do not. The question becomes, do we value human life unconditionally, or do we attach moral judgment to need? Let's look at smaller daily examples. Should someone be free to stay in bed all day, waste potential, ignore opportunities? Most would say yes. Should someone be free to take drugs that slowly kill them? This becomes harder. Should someone be allowed to sell their organs? Most societies say no, even if the choice is voluntary. Why? Because the desperation behind such choices makes the freedom questionable, and because allowing it could normalize exploitation. The deeper issue is that self-harm challenges our understanding of freedom. Freedom is not only the ability to choose, but the ability to choose well. True freedom requires knowledge, self-control, emotional health, and opportunity. A starving person is not free. A traumatized person is not free. A manipulated person is not free. When people lack these conditions, their harmful choices are not expressions of freedom, but symptoms of unfreedom. In that case, intervention is not the enemy of freedom, it may be its protector. So should people be free to make harmful choices? In some cases, yes, because dignity requires autonomy. In other cases, no, because life is precious and freedom without support becomes abandonment. The most moral path may not be pure freedom or pure protection, but compassionate respect. Let people choose, but do not leave them alone. Offer help, guidance, and safer paths. Intervene only when harm is extreme or autonomy is compromised. True ethics sees people not just as isolated individuals making choices, but as human beings shaped by pain, hope, and connection.